The first item on the agenda is the Hammond Woods definitive subdivision plan field completion discussion. Bill, do you want to do a basic overview, just?
Developer, we're taking over the development of this subdivision to give us a sense of how the project is going, and this has been, going on for quite some time, so the board is concerned about how long it's taking, and would like to see this project wrapped up as soon as possible. We have a couple of recent memos from Graves Engineering, one dated December 7th, in which Mike Andrade states he met with Tim and Tim's engineer, Steve Brissett, to review some of the issues with the sidewalks, and it appears that there was an agreement as to what needed to be done regarding the sidewalk issue, so I'm assuming Tim will proceed to comply with that. We also have a memo dated November 2nd, 2018, from Mike Andrade as well, where he did an inspection of some of the sidewalk issues and other work that's been done. And he did note some work has been done, but not as much as we had, as the planning board had anticipated. Going back further in time, in August of 2017, the board had asked Mr. Reardon to try to wrap up the project by December of 2017. And obviously another year has gone by since that deadline was missed. So we invited Mr. Reardon in here tonight to explain to the board what's going on and see if there's a way we can get this project moved to completion.
What would you like to know? I agree totally with you, but this fall has really produced, the weather has really been an it hasn't helped us at all. Okay, this is the first I saw of Mr. Andre's review of what was done up there. A couple more things have been done than just what he's saying here. The guardrails are in, all the catch basins have been raised. We were ready to put the berm in. He suggested we didn't do it because they were scheduled to do it yesterday. And I said, I agree totally with that. I'd rather do it once, do it correctly. Okay, all the gravel is in place for sidewalks, put in the berm. It's probably a 3-day project for Palmer Paving once we can get this done. It's just with the weather in October and November, and then we already have 4 or 5 inches of frost. He suggested we wait, and I agreed with that. So all the stumps have been removed. We've cleaned up the place. We put in the guardrail. We've added fencing on the final detention basin. We started cleaning them out. We've hydro-seeded part of the entrance. We're trying. It's just a matter of, we started too late and the weather came in faster than expected.
We have, I sent you some correspondence we got from the Charlton Heritage Preservation Trust regarding the open space issues.
Yes.
She had a number of items that were supposed to have been completed. Can you give us an update on where that stands?
The stakes, I'm not sure who took those out. I think it's the property owners on lot 11 and lot 12, okay? There's sidewalks that go across the front of that, and once we get the sidewalks in, everything has to be loomed, seeded, done. I'd rather do it once than twice. Same with staking out the whole lot. When they do the as-built plan, I'd rather them stake the whole back lot so they're coming once. It's just a matter of money, saving money. And some of that, ruts and stone wall and stuff, I think there's motorcycles, four-wheelers that go down these trails. I can't stop them from doing that, so, okay.
There were a number of documents that were required to be recorded. Is there anything preventing that from happening?
No, nothing at all.
So you can
It's really, just, get my lawyer to get everything ready. That's something that's,
be nice to get that.
that's a slip up on my part.
What about the signage?
Excuse me?
What about the signage for the open space as well?
I didn't know I had to do signage,
I think it's,
okay?
am I reading that right?
I proposed one thing to try to help this when we were swapping land, and then they came back and they wanted a lot more money. I gave them the money. That was the only way they were gonna allow for a swap of the land last year for lot 12. And, to me, why should I have to do both? It seemed like all they were after was money. So I gave them their check, but then now they want me to clean up walls and do this and do that. We cleaned up the walls and the walkway last year, and now they're still saying they're not satisfied. This is the first I've heard of it.
Some of these items are fairly minor in nature.
No, I
Yeah,
understand,
think-
and that's why I said I
I
would.
think they could be
Yeah.
accomplished without a
No,
great deal of expense.
no, I'm not here to fight. And like I said, last year after we had the meeting, I had my excavator go in there, clean up any roots, stumps, anything we might have disturbed. I thought we took care of that, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the board would like you to work on these issues with the Preservation Trust
No, I have no problem with that.
to make sure that their interests are
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
considered, and it's a very important part of this project to preserve that open space and make it usable for the residents of the town, so.
right. It was actually relocating the entrance of the trail, and that's where a lot of it came from, so. I haven't been on that trail since last year, so I don't know if the neighbor, the people living next to it are putting things on it or doing things on it. That's not.
I
And as
think
far as
the signage
boulders,
would help in that
yes.
respect, too.
As far as putting boulders on lot 12, the homeowner on lot 12 will not let me down his driveway with boulders. So. On lot 11, we can still do that, because that's their land, we can still get in there, so.
Do we have board questions?
Now, the boulders need to go on lot 12, is that, how do we resolve that?
I mean, I can get in, I'm sure he'll let me down, he just doesn't want a machine on there with heavy boulders. I mean, if we put up arborvitae's, we put up some kind of plant, is that a,
I'd rather have, check with the trust on that one.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, it does, so. Can we check with the trust and see if the planting is accessible and remove boulders that denote that property? that
Sure.
line?
They're gonna probably want permanent, they're gonna probably want boulders or something, some sort of a, but if they can't get down there.
Yeah, you gotta, there's gotta be some alternative, I guess, within reason.
What's your schedule like now, Tim? Are you gonna be able to wrap this up so that it could be brought to town meeting for acceptance? Is that
that's what
a
I.
reasonable?
When is town meeting? Because as soon as they open the plants back up, you know,
May.
like I said, it's a week's worth of work, and we'll have the sidewalks, the berms, the roadway top coated. I've already called National Grid for the streetlights. It's just a matter of working with National Grid, and no rush at all.
There are road acceptance plans that need to be prepared, that town meeting actually votes on accepting the layout of the way, and the selectmen have to have a meeting on that as well.
Mhm.
So there's a compressed timeframe, so you need not only to get the work done, but also to comply with all the legal requirements for
Okay.
acceptance.
Yes.
Town meeting's
one
usually
thing-
what, first or second week in
May.
May?
I mean, that
Okay.
should, if it's
And
not,
there's gotta be at least 2 weeks prior to that to be on
Right.
warrant?
Well, they have to meet with
So
the-
you're-
I will,
you're-
like I said, the
looking at
sooner I
beginning
can
of
get it
April.
done, I'm that close, so.
so if it's
The other
not-
thing, not to
I'm
interrupt.
sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I asked Mr. Andre was, Sturbridge has allowed me to use concrete bounds instead of granite bounds. It's something that wasn't in his letter.
We never, from all of my years in the planning board, we've only done granite because of plowing, because the concrete just gets broken
Deteriorates.
apart after a couple of years with plows, and if it's done right, like we keep on saying, let's do it one time and have it done right versus have it all be a mess, unless the board feels differently.
No,
That's what's been prior to this point, it sounds.
Yeah, we've been asked that in,
Okay,
through all my
no, it's just
years.
something I didn't use them all, that's why I asked, so.
No, it is a mess. The plows just rip it apart and then it just makes everything look bad.
I didn't hear your response about the signage.
The signage, I'm sure, are they just looking for a small sign? I'll have one made, open space.
I'll try to get
I-
clarification on what
yes.
you're looking for.
That, or I can email Lisa and ask her what she's looking for a sign.
Okay.
and then if you would get back to Bill with,
No, that's fine.
so we know what's happening,
No, that's fine.
and that something is
Yeah.
happening.
No, I don't think it's a big issue as far as anything that she has on this list. I mean, it's, the biggest thing is the boulders, he just won't let me down that driveway. He said, I'd really recommend, I really don't want you to do that, so.
So this currently expires in February?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll be up for a renewal prior to,
Yes.
So, most of these, like the signs, a lot of this can be done during the winter, during now, and then there's some things that obviously have to wait till the spring. I guess we have to kind of have that, I don't want to say a corrective action plan, but something that's going to be pretty segmented, because if it isn't, if May doesn't happen, I think we should pull the bond. We should take it over and it's been, 2003 is a long time.
Well, not only that, but last November, we gave him a year's extension, and nothing was done within that year's time. The things weren't cleared up. Now, we're gonna go again till
I
May?
mean, I know
That's,
no, I think that.
we need something done quickly.
I say we look at it when they come up for a renewal in February and
Yeah.
see what's been done.
So,
and-
in
and
February,
implement it.
we need to see significant,
It-
um,
This time of year, what would you like to be,
like, anything that can be done without, then, and report that, right? And
The only thing that probably can't be done is the paving.
And
When do they open up?
the planting of the trees and the shrubs, though.
Depends on the weather, right?
You see, mid-April.
Yeah, anything that isn't weather
Yeah,
related.
planting trees and shrubs, like that's done, I guess.
Okay, but it's still,
But all the
but some of that
recordings-
goes back to a year ago.
Now, my only question is, when Mike suggested not doing the curbing, were you not gonna do the top coat as well?
Not the curb and
Well,
the
it's-
berm, right? Oh.
they do the curbing,
Then the top coat?
then the sidewalks, because that curbing has to be backed up, and then they pave to the curbing. So
Right.
if you can't back that up, everything, you know,
Falls apart.
that's what it is, everything's frozen.
That's why I was kinda
This is
Mike was
Lisa's
here to
letter?
answer that question.
Oh, okay.
It's not,
Because
Yeah.
if the top coat's on, and you still have the curbing, I don't know.
Well, the curbing goes on first?
Yeah,
The
then you do the
curbing's
top
goes
coat
on
Then
onto
the
the
top
curbing.
coat goes on.
And there is some areas we have to extend the pavement that's there because it's not in the right place to put in the curbings.
It was in his report also.
So we understand, weather is an impediment, but anything that's not weather related, I think the board would like to see accomplished by the next,
Are we talking
February.
like the recordings of all these things and
Recordings.
sending
Yes,
out?
that could
the-
certainly-
definitely.
Yeah, that's,
When
Yeah.
you're back in front of this board in February, all the recordings, anything that needs,
That's fine.
all the lawyer
Mhm.
stuff, get
no,
all
that's
that.
fine,
yes,
Because
certainly some of the,
The ice doesn't, it
Yes.
doesn't, the
Right.
cold weather doesn't
right.
get in the way of that kind of stuff. The signage, whatever, reach out to Lisa and let us know
Mhm.
what,
What she's
you guys
looking
can figure
Oh,
that out.
that's
The boulders, at least have a plan.
The frozen ground might be a good time to do the boulders if you can do it.
That's what I'm thinking.
Might be a good time.
On
to
the side of
approach
Lot
them
11, yes.
So for so we just make sure we're clear. So on February, we want, first of all, are we willing to do the February and the May and then get on record that if it's not accepted at town meeting, if it doesn't get to town meeting, then we're done. We're pulling the bond and we're finishing everything, we're gonna go that route. Does that?
Yep.
And there'll be no more extensions because it's been over a decade.
Sure.
So for February, we expect everything to be recorded, any of the legal stuff, and figure out what's going on with what Lisa wants. You guys compromise. I'm not saying you have to give in for work together, come up with a plan. February, we want to hear that plan and know that. And there, you can have a plan ready to say, this is when, as soon as the weather clears, this is what we're gonna do and remember, you need to have a couple weeks to prep, to get on, to get your warrant on,
Mhm.
it would be a warrant, right?
Yep.
Town meeting. If February comes along and, like, the recordings aren't done and there's more excuses, we're gonna pull it. So that's kind of your action plan. February come, everything needs to be done, make us happy, then we will extend it to May to get you to town meeting, and then we'll be done. Because you don't want to be here and
No.
be,
But you also said it was, since 2003. I have not owned it since 2003.
I'm-
It sat for
No.
10 years
I-
Yeah,
before I did
we're aware of
anything.
that, but we're also aware of the multiple 90-day
Yeah.
deadlines that we have given you.
No, I
And-
understand.
And minimal has been
Yeah.
completed.
Right.
So that's the,
But there's progress that's done every day. It's not like I drive back home and nothing happens. A lot of stuff happens, weather-related. You're in construction, you understand
Oh, I
how this
totally-
process works.
Yeah, listen, I totally understand,
Okay?
but when I see on a Graves
Right.
report, the
Yes.
sidewalk was gravel, and it's not paved yet,
Yeah.
and today's December
Yeah,
11th,
no, I
12th.
understand.
That was talked
And,
about in August.
you know,
and other
Yeah.
contractors manage to do it, so we just kind of, I think just take the February, I think we
Mm-hmm.
all, last time we saw you, said, next time we see you, it's gonna be done, or we're gonna
I
stop
understand.
everything. I think we're being kind by giving you till February, when the deadline,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll assess it, and then till May, and then it will be done, and have that as, with no exceptions. So
But-
just make it happen, and if there's
Um,
any issues and you need to communicate with us, go through Bill, and,
Or Lisa?
and deal with
And then let us
Lisa.
know.
And,
The biggest thing is to get everything completed, to deal with a company the size of Palmer Paving. They're not gonna put me first. I stay on them. I notified them. I said, we've been, Mike Andre asked me, he said, I recommend not going forward from this point. To have them come to me first thing in the spring, I cannot guarantee that.
well, you're gonna
I
have to,
will.
you're just
You're
gonna have to
really try.
figure
No,
it out,
I'm gonna
right?
try my
Okay.
best. That's all I can do, so.
All right, so
And-
do we
and
have,
One more thing, when you do come in February, if you please just have a detailed plan a weekly plan of how you plan to at least complete the project, so that we can see that.
we said that, we want everything that can be done by February done, and a plan on what's gonna happen between then and May to make sure it's at town meeting. Like, no exceptions, no excuses. Is the board good with that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we go with the plan that Patty stated.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Can you also ask to do an update as far as all the costs I've incurred this year, as far as completing things? From
You want-
You'd like to do
Andre?
an updated bond?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 No
Do
problem.
we have to get that in, right, yeah, so they're gonna have Mike, you're gonna have Mike calculate it, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're hired.
All right. Being past 7:10, we have the Valley Green Road definitive subdivision plan. We just received the new plan, the new revised plan at 3:30 today, so our engineer hasn't had a chance to look at it. I don't know, it's up to the board. Do we want to have a presentation done on what they've done without Mike? Is it worth the time to have that? Do we want to hear it, or do we want to, I always feel uncomfortable going, and I know we have a time issue, that's why, otherwise I would just say no. I feel uncomfortable going through things when Mike hasn't verified everything for me.
But, we do have a public hearing, and there are people in the audience that might want to
Yeah, here's some of the
see
responses.
see what's
to
been done since the last plan was
What
submitted.
is the deadline for the 90 days?
January, I believe. Mike, do you know when you resubmitted? Okay.
But this has to be taken care of before the site plan, right? And the site plan deadline is the 2nd, so, we need to get through it anyways, but.
Yeah, it should,
Great.
Mike should just, show the corrections he made from the last revision, I would say.
Okay.
Just
Move it.
to make sense. Yep.
So, for the record, Mike Novak from Meridian Associates. Dan Leary is going to be my easel tonight, since I forgot one. Apologies for that. So I'll just have him go ahead and open up to the plan and profile sheet. And I can just
Oh, we don't have a board?
again, with the disclaimer that this was submitted today, and Graves has not commented on this, so I understand that. And we did submit a response to comments addressing all of his comments, so hopefully we'll hear back from him relatively quickly in terms of if there's anything else he needs. I'll just hit the major ones. Excuse me. The layout of the road hasn't changed, location hasn't changed. One of the things we did do to address the comments and continue this as a waiverless submission was change the shoulder and cross-section grading from 2-to-1 to 3-to-1, which is in compliance with your bylaws, and addressing one of Mike's comments directly. From there, we also added some stormwater mitigation, catch basins near the throat of the cul-de-sac, going into a not infiltration, holding tank, and then dispersing it through a level spreader, again, addressing the comment of straight runoff to Old Worcester Road.
Do me a favor?
yeah.
And, can you reference the number? Just, it helps us to
Yeah,
talk.
sure,
Sorry.
sure. I'll just go down the list, and I made some notes just to keep it quick, but I'll go down the list.
You don't have to go through
Yep.
I just want to be on the right
So, let's
page.
see, I've mentioned comment 6,
Right.
and that is in relation to the 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 grading. Comment 10 was in relation to stormwater management, so that was the other one that I've mentioned. And then I think the other comment that is worth mentioning is, just need to find it, bear with me a second. Nope, where'd it go? Comment 3. We checked the distance from Hammer Rock Road, center line to center line, and we are well in excess of the required distance. We use GIS for Hammer Rock, but we're so far away that I think even if we were off by 50 feet, we're still well within compliance. Everything else, I mean, certainly be happy to answer any questions, but I think those are the major ones in relation to design that I think would be relevant. We did offer a response to comment number 7, which I think he was asking for the planning board to talk to council on. I believe our council and planning's council has talked about that as well, so we offered. I just put it in this as a placeholder.
Can you explain what the gist of number 7 is, Mike?
Yeah, sure. So I'll read his comment. The board shall note that the subdivision plan proposes to create 2 new lots by combining the existing lot 10 and 10-1. This requires separate process of plan from the definitive subdivision, and perhaps prior to the subdivision incorporates portions of both existing lots. Thus, it is unclear at this time if this definitive plan can be approved as proposed. Graves suggests the planning board request clarification, and our response in summary is that since both lots are part of the application process with both owners being a part of the process, that the separate A&R prior is not required. Anything beyond that,
Mark, is that correct?
Yeah, as long as the 2 lots are owned by the same entity, or in the alternative, the 2 different owners are co-applicants for the subdivision approval, I don't see a problem with it.
What if one is 61A and one isn't?
Totally unrelated question. If there's 61A implicated, then they have to go through the 61A process.
Can you combine a 61A lot with a lot that's not 61A without?
If you get the 61A lot out of 61A, yes, but you have to go through the process of taking it out of 61A for any change of use or for any offer to purchase that you might match in a purchase and sale agreement.
So prior to approving a plan that combines those two, that 61A lot would have to be out of 61A first?
I would think that before you change it for its useful purpose, this happens all the time with solar. You've got a farm, and now you're gonna change it to solar. that's a change of use. Even if you're leasing the land, you still have to do an appraisal on the leased property. If you're selling the land, obviously, you would do the same thing. And if you're, and that's the typical way that the 61A would impact something like that.
Alternatively, could you put the other lot into 61A?
It's supposed to be in agriculture, so I don't know if it's going into agriculture, yes.
There's a minimum acreage requirement,
Are-
5
are
acres,
you-
I believe.
I mean, I don't think, are you suggesting that growing marijuana would be agriculture? No, I don't know that, it's certainly not under the zoning act. I don't know how that would be reviewed by DOR for 61A purposes. We'll ask the question together if you like.
Sure.
Mark, is there a requirement that the planning board approve the definitive plan before acting on the site plan approval application?
It doesn't make any sense to labor mightily over the site plan decision if there's not a definitive plan that preserves the old zoning.
Right.
So the most important thing for me to hear, and I think you represented that there's no waivers required any longer?
There was not any, one of the comments suggested that if we kept the 2-to-1, we would need one, so we changed that in order to keep it waiverless.
So I think the most important person is not here tonight, and that's Mike, and Mike needs to tell us that he's examined the plan carefully and that there are no waivers required. If that's the case, you're duty bound to sign the plan. So, but we need to clear that hurdle, and I think it would be appropriate to get that opinion from Mike before the close of this hearing on site plan approval.
And the answer for the 61A piece. right?
Makes sense, too. Yeah. I'll be looking into that with counsel for the applicant.
So you're suggesting that we have our engineer verify that the plan conforms to the planning board's rules and regulations, and if
Engineer
so,
will-
the board must approve the plan.
Well, if it doesn't comply with each and every rule and reg, they need a waiver. And that should be that's gonna be a big discussion for this board. The plan has been filed for the purposes of vesting their rights. It's not like they're planning to build, a bunch of houses. So this is, the law allows this. But typically, when I sit with a board and somebody has submitted a plan for the purposes of vesting rights, you need to meet every rule and regulation.
Do we have more board questions? Because we'll open it up if we,
I don't have any.
It sounds like we can, if you're going to take public comment, I'm not sure, but once you're done, it sounds like this should be continued to January 2nd, when I think we were talking about our next evening.
Yes.
Okay, no questions.
so we'll open it up. Remember, questions, please, based on the subdivision plan and not the site plan. So if there's any questions from the audience, please state your name and address and,
Ask a question.
Hi, Ken Howard, 181 Worcester Road. I'm not sure who I should ask this, but I always heard that if something comes out of 61A, it has to be offered to the town first. Is that correct?
If there's a purchase and sale agreement for the land, then the town has the right to match it. The town has the right to appraise the property. It also has to go through the planning board and the conservation commission for recommendations to the board of selectmen as to whether they should match the offer or just let it go.
Thanks.
Gerard Russell, 63 Old Worcester Road. Is there time for all of that before January 2?
No. It's, it's gotta be posted on 3 separate meetings. So that's not gonna happen with Christmas 14 days away.
anything else? Okay, so
right,
do
continue
we
meeting.
have a motion to continue this to January 2nd?
Second.
All in favor?
Was that the motion?
No, I think
Were you
so.
looking for a motion? No, I'd like to make a
I said,
motion, we
do we
continue
have a
it to
motion?
January 2nd.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
Coming up
better
quick.
start shopping. Okay.
Being past 7:15, I'm going to open up the public hearing for the Valley Green Road site plan application. I'll let you,
I think we could just ask Dan to give us an
okay,
update.
you can give us up again.
Good evening, this is Dan Leary with the Valley Green Grow Project Management. I'll just do a quick update because we've had quite a bit going on in the last couple of weeks since we've last spoken. First, some updates on the engineering work that's been asked of us, and we've been very busy with the peer reviews. First is on noise. Our consultant, Ascentech, who you heard from at the last meeting, working with HMMH on really two additional parts that are required, have been, I should say, they've been requested for at this point. One of them is a base sound level study, which is going to be wrapping up, if not tomorrow, I believe Thursday morning. So that's been in place, and we've set up a number of stations where sound levels have been taken. The next step to that is to take those sound levels for our engineer, Jim Barnes, to work with HMMH to agree to what the baseline level is, and then to use that and run it through a proof of concept, which would be taking our design, our layout at that point, looking at specific equipment, anything that's going to be emitting noise, and to run that through a proof of concept to make sure that we have concurrence, that what we are proposing to do is achievable to meet the standards which have been put into the noise mitigation plan, which I believe at the last meeting we heard from HMMH was reasonable. Not to put words in their mouth, but it did seem like the plan they found reasonable. So that's underway, and we anticipate having that finalized conclusively by the end of next week with HMMH, and hopefully you'll have the results at the conclusion of that. The next one is construction management and soils management plans. This is really a coordinated effort between Meridian, Golder Associates, our LSP, Meridian, who's here with us tonight, and Ty and Bond, who is the town's peer consultant on this. Following the last meeting, we had a number of discussions with them, including one where we laid out exactly what we're going to be doing between then and the end of next week, what deliverables would be turned over for review, and I believe that we've come up with a reasonable plan that is underway, that will have the answers that the peer consultant is looking for the end of next week. But that is well underway.
Dan, can you describe a little bit what that kind of a plan is?
Sure. So the construction management plan, actually, I'll have Mike Novak, because he's the one that's drafting it,
Okay.
and we'll talk about the soils management plan and what that is.
Sure. So we've, after the conference call discussion with both LSPs, both our team LSP and the peer review consultant, we determined that we would look at a staged erosion control / soil management plan for the entire site, breaking it up in phases. The thought behind this is we could better manage the soil, moving it around. I'm sorry.
I didn't know if they could hear you.
Am I,
Can everybody
Or
hear?
just move your microphone up a little bit, perfect.
how's that? All right. I'll back up a little bit. So after a discussion with both LSPs, both the team LSP and the peer review LSP, we've decided to present to him a phased erosion control / soil management plan, which will break up the site into basically chunks that we'll attack and construct, and this will allow us to better manage smaller pockets of soil, to move them back and forth and make sure that they're contained and monitored if they're in one of the areas of, we'll say, higher concern. Excuse me. With that, we're going to present that to the town's LSP for review and comment, which he'll get back to us, and we'll continue the dialogue. And as Dan said, by the end of the next week, we hope to be in a place where he's comfortable with what we've proposed, both for erosion control and for soil management. And this will serve a dual purpose to address some of Mike's comments as well, with such a large site, moving everything at once. So I think that's kind of the gist of it. We're definitely in the works of it, but it's just not ready to present at this point. The plan is probably to make that a supplemental submittal, because it'll just be adding 5 to 7 more pages to the already large plan set. I think it'll be easier to reference and use for everyone's sake at that point, unless the board has an objection to that.
I'm not clear, are there two plans or is there one plan?
It's going to be a set of plans that will function for both addressing some of the erosion control that Graves Engineering had for comments, and also for soil management at the same time.
I heard a construction management plan?
Well, that's what we're going to call it,
Okay.
as a plan set, the construction management plan
Okay.
set for moving, but it's essentially to move the soil and to monitor soil, move soil, and erosion control purposes.
Thanks.
So that's the plan anyway, unless I hear any variation from that from the board.
Great, thank you. And while Mike is here, the next piece is the updates that we're working with, the next piece is the updates that we've, working to finish off the questions that were outstanding with Graves. And maybe start with the soil tests. Test kits.
Yes, one of the reasons in the slight delay in getting back responding to every comment from Graves and getting you something back is we did conduct additional soil testing in regards to drainage analysis on site to specifically address one of Graves's comments, but to also help us to address the rest of them. We were a little delayed in getting that done. It has been done. I'm incorporating that and updating as needed. The plan is to have everything back to the board and to Graves by Thursday of this week. And hopefully with the board's blessing, and if Graves has the ability, to meet in your office, Mr. Scanlon, middle to end of next week and discuss any other major sticking points that he may have in order to address them in a timely manner to get a final set back to the board. So there's actually 2 rounds of comments from Graves. We received the initial ones, we submitted a second plan. He responded to some of those comments and then added a few additional ones. The next submittal will address every comment that's still outstanding, and then from there, I hope the meeting can whittle them down to everything at least that can be conditioned at that point. That's the plan.
Okay, so then the next update is with respect to traffic and the conservation effort, and I just want to pass out. I'm sorry, I couldn't get that to you earlier. There's 2 sheets, maybe if you just pass it down.
Awesome,
please.
thank you. Yep.
So one of these, there's 2 documents. The first one I sent to Mr. Scanlon yesterday, which is our conservation, when we did our site walk several weeks ago. This is the update from them, which includes a preliminary design for how we might be able to access the site from the western side of Route 20, which is the vicinity of the wetlands. Namely, that this design shows over 8,000 square feet of disturbance, and this memo describes what we discussed, I believe, in detail at the last meeting, that would make this really infeasible from a construction standpoint. And I believe this memo mirrors what the town's peer review consultant also witnessed during that site walk. The second document is one that was asked, there was a question raised based on discussions with, I think, a butter may have had with MDOT, Mass Department of Transportation, about sort of what their thoughts were and what did we discuss when we sat down with a preliminary meeting with them. And they were able to put together a memo that outlined what we discussed at this meeting, what options there were, and what their suggestions were. Again, this was not a formal filing, but rather a preliminary discussion about what they would find acceptable. and we just received this several hours ago, so my apologies for getting it to you just now.
Can you summarize what the letter states?
Should I read it? It's one page?
Maybe the most relevant.
Okay, so,
I would just summarize it, I mean,
Read the last paragraph, it might be.
sure. So what it does say is we met with MDOT, we discussed a number of options with them. They did not support a driveway on the eastern portion of the property, primarily due to concerns with site distances, grade, trucks making U-turns in an unsignalized location, crossing 2 lanes of traffic, and the volume of U-turns that would occur there. The district's preference for access would be to utilize the signalized intersection at Route 20, Old Worcester Road, as opposed to a new unsignalized driveway on Route 20. The district would also consider a driveway on Route 20 to the westerly end of the site, where the road is straighter and flatter, if the proponent could overcome their wetland crossing challenges. I believe this is consistent with what we and Ms. Connolly, WSP Group, had presented several weeks ago. And so finally, that brings us to probably one of the larger topics that's we've been working very heavily on, which is the topic of odor. We had one of our odor experts that could not join us last week because of travel, the last meeting because of travel issues. She's been able to join us this evening. Sonia Bollier from RWDI, who can come on up here and join me, but if I could just, while she's getting ready, I've asked her if it'd be acceptable to give maybe a 5 to 10 minute overview of what dispersion modeling and odor mitigation means to this project and to the community. But while I do that, just if I could just put it in the big picture of things. Not with us tonight is Mike Thornton from Vanderweil. He's been here at all of our meetings. He's our mechanical designer, and he's responsible for all these systems. Because of the, the comments that have been given us to the town by Dr. Ostajic, which are excellent comments, and because of the discussions, we've asked him to bump his a trip up. So he's in the Netherlands right now, working with the design team over there to finalize the specifications and equipment with our designers in the Netherlands. We ordinarily would do this after the site plan, maybe in January. We had him scheduled to go there, but we've bumped it up. So he's there right now. And based on the discussions that we've had with Dr. Ostajic over the last couple of weeks, including over 4 hours of phone calls with him just last week, we do believe that we're on track to putting together a reasonable plan and that we can conclude with. And we believe that we've figured out what would be an agreeable sort of document that can be stapled to a decision, to use those words. And part of that involves it's really 2 pieces. The first piece is how do we understand what the odor is and use technology to mitigate it within the facility as it's leaving the facility. And the second one is as it's leaving the facility, how do we understand what that means to the property line, to abutters. So while Mike's very engaged in the design of the first part right now overseas, here with us is Sonia to talk about really the second part.
So Dan asked me to give you a little bit of an overview on the company that I work for. Sorry, I don't talk loud normally.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Actually, there you go.
All right.
This one looks better, I think.
All right. Sorry. My name is Sonia Bollier, and I'm a partner with RWDI. I'm also a project manager, and I've been with the firm for 16, close to 17 years now. I started there as a project engineer in the building air quality group, doing modeling of air quality impacts. And here I am now, a project manager. The company, really provides specialty engineering services. We work with architects and engineers a lot. We don't do any design work ourselves. But what we do is support the design professionals to make sure that their design is optimized to the best of their abilities, that we're bringing about some cost savings potentially to the project, that we're making sure that the project is safe for everybody, that it provides the best environment for the users, and that it minimizes the impact on the environment that it's going to be in. We are based in Ontario, Canada, about an hour west of Toronto, and that's where our headquarters is. But we have offices across Canada, in the States, in the UK, India, in a lot of places around the world. And we're about 500 people worldwide as an engineering company, privately owned still, which we think is really important. Some of the important points, I think, of the company that you might find interesting are that the company itself is structured in a way that allows each of the different groups to have their own specialties. And so we have a group that specializes in assessing the impact of projects on the microclimate, the existing microclimate, for example, environment in an urban setting. So if we're building it, like in Boston, for example, there's a requirement that any new project that gets constructed needs to demonstrate that the impact that it will have on the existing environment with respect to pedestrian wind will be acceptable. So there's a group that specializes in carrying out these types of analyses, not only for projects in Boston, but around the world. We have a group that specializes in air quality and building air quality assessments and modeling and looking at the impact of wind on buildings and how buildings move. So we have many different niche services and studies that we provide for designers. And one of the things that we're most proud of is that even though we are just this little company that started out in the 1970s back in Canada, we've worked on the world's tallest buildings. We've worked on all the major bridges in North America. We've worked with major universities and colleges around the States, Canada, and the world, hospitals. So Boston is a really good area for us where we do a lot of studies because of the number of universities that you guys have, hospitals, because of the local requirements for pedestrian winds, biopharma, et cetera. So one of the other areas of the company that I think is most relevant to this project is the fact that we have a group that specializes in carrying out modeling specifically for permitting and regulatory purposes. In Ontario, there was a very strict and very well-defined regulatory process that all projects have to go through, whether you are adding a new fume hood stack at a hospital, an existing hospital, for example, or you're building a brand new industrial plant. There are very strict criteria that the owners and developers have to comply with and demonstrate compliance with. And we have a group that specializes in carrying out all the detailed modeling that's required as part of that process. And so that's a little bit about the company itself. Oh, right, sorry. And so obviously what's probably most relevant to this project is the fact that even though the cannabis industry is still relatively new, we've worked on, since 2014, we've worked on several cannabis facilities similar to the one that's proposed here, where there's a new growing facility that's proposed, and we've been asked to carry out detailed modeling to figure out what the impacts are going to be from that facility and to work with the design team to manage those impacts to levels that are considered acceptable. So that's part of the repertoire of projects that we have under our belts. So I don't know if you guys have any questions so far. I can explain a little bit also what we're planning on doing for your project specifically.
We have, I know we had a conference call with Ned just yesterday. And he updated us, but he didn't update the board on what you're working on. We heard that it's been hours and hours and hours of conversation to work on the plan with significant changes. Will you go over do you guys want to hear the basics of the change?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Why don't I describe a little bit what we're up to? So, what we do is really try to predict what the impacts are going to be, because you don't want to build something and then realize that the impacts are not acceptable. You want to be able to manage that at the design stage so that you're putting all the measures in place now, rather than later. And so, what we do is, using the information that's provided to us by the design team, whether it's the architectural information that we use, all the mechanical information, we use that to carry out some modeling that will then give us a prediction of what the air quality impacts are going to be at the property line. And the tool that we are proposing to use is the same tool that the Mass DEP requires when you're submitting for approval of a new combustion source for a generator, for example, or a boiler. The Mass DEP requires that you carry out some detailed modeling to demonstrate that the air quality impacts, the health-based air quality impacts, are going to be meeting applicable limits. And so we're proposing to use that same methodology to predict what the impacts are going to be for a full range of wind conditions and atmospheric conditions and so on. And so using that approach, then we'll be able to figure out whether or not, what kind of impacts we're going to be expecting, and then working with Ned, figuring out what is an acceptable level of impact and how we can manage that. So that's sort of the grand scheme of things. Should I go into some of the detail on the maybe source emissions, or?
I think one other piece of detail before you get to that, that was a lot of what was being discussed was exactly what is the technology that's going to be absorbing the odor, so that what is inside is brought to acceptable levels. So first, understand the facility is under negative pressure, and there's 28 exhaust stacks that are on the facility. So by doing that, we're able to control where all of the odor would be coming through. And through working with Dr. Ostajic and a number of vendors over the last week and a half, we've identified the deep bed carbon filtration systems that we believe would be acceptable. And, using that as a starting point, obviously all this, the plan includes systems, how we're going to check these systems, how, I think Dr. Ostajic would say at this point, well, it's great if it's written in a spec sheet, but let's see the proof that it does what it says it's going to do. So we're working on exactly how we incorporate those types of things into the odor mitigation plan through what's called design criteria, how we're gonna implement this throughout. So getting to that point, to understanding how we're going to manage the odor coming up through these stacks really was a lot of what was the discussion over the last week and a half. And then that brought us to Dr. Ostajic's understanding of how we'd be using this modeling and what Sonia's team would be doing. So once it leaves these stacks, what does that mean? And maybe that's...
Yeah, and that's really the piece that we're gonna look after. And so, based on what we've done for other similar facilities, what we're planning on doing is using some of that knowledge and that information to have a baseline from which we can start working. So for example, how smelly is the air coming out of the facility? That's not a number that you can pull out of a specification sheet or anything. You need to get that information. You need to know what is coming out in order to be able to predict what it's going to be at some distance downwind. And so in the context of these previous projects, what we've done is carried out some sampling of the air inside those facilities, and through a third party, done odor panel testing where people are exposed to that exhaust sample, and then determine essentially how much it needs to be diluted by. And so we're able to, with that approach, which is a standard approach, a standard process that's well documented, that odor panel testing approach, you can figure out how much that exhaust needs to be diluted by and what the initial strength of the odor is. And so with that information in hand, we can then figure out or use that as a baseline for, like I said before, what is actually coming out of the stack as a worst case. If we use the information from the manufacturer to understand how much that odor could potentially be reduced through the filter bed, then again, that's another piece of information that gets fed into the model. And then once we have that piece of information along with all of the design parameters of the facility and running through this simulation tool, we can predict what the impacts are going to be. And then that's when we're all gonna work together to figure out what we can do if we need to do anything more so that we're achieving an acceptable level of performance.
It seems like a very short time to do all of this, only because the other day, I was lucky enough to be invited to go visit a facility that's just north of us in North Brookfield. It was 156,000 square feet, and there was zero odor. And when the planning board permitted it, the rule was zero odor. Neighbors, so there were houses probably 30 feet away. And even within the facility, there was zero, and there was marijuana growing at different phases. And when you stood next to the door of the room, you actually smelled nothing. When you opened it, you could when you walked in, you could clearly smell the, skunk times 1,000, but nothing leaked at all. So, but they designed this plan. It took them a year to design. There's so many different scrubbers. Every single room has its own HVAC separate system, every single room. They use the thick charcoal filters. They also use the negative ion and whatever, the zappers. And then there was another filtration before it even left the outside. So we were at this building. It was huge. It was in, said everything was growing, and zero. So I can say that it is possible to get zero odor. I just have, my question is that can a design be built? Can this be created by January 2nd so it could be stapled onto a plan? That was that. And what do you, I guess that's my question. Do you think that we're gonna get there? Because when I see the condition of zero odor, then if other towns can do it, we can do that. And they did it, and they managed to handle it. So is that gonna be possible to get there?
Well, we can certainly do our part, and we've started to do our part, which is that modeling piece. What happens to the air once it leaves the stack, and how does it impact the property line? So that is underway, and we can certainly have some more complete answers for you, and definitive answers for you by January 2nd. I think that the rest of the piece, I don't know that that's maybe a question that you'd want to answer, Dan, like the full design of the facility.
I know you want to hear from the experts, and I apologize that our expert is
And
not.
we understand that,
But yes, we will get it done for this, because we just completely changed our approach to this to, the discussions with Dr. Ostrovec have been very positive, in that we understand, he understands a lot, he's got a lot of experience with this. We have a lot of experience on our team with permitting and putting these types of facilities together. I think Sonia described 6 that they've done, and how, starting with the standards, agreeing to with Dr. Ostrovec, what is the right standard? Zero odor isn't a defined standard, but there is
He tells me that there's no such thing as zero odor,
Yeah,
but but I witnessed it, so
Right,
it's.
but there's an industry standard that defines exactly what that is, how it's measured, and there's great ordinances that we've seen, and Sonia can talk about some in Canada, that define how we deal with things when it's not exactly right. But yes, we can do it. Our approach to getting this done, again, is for us to come up with the design criteria that, so you're not gonna see the facility fully designed before January 2nd. That is not possible. What you will see is a design criteria that runs a proof of concept. So this is much like what we're doing with noise. We've identified what the standard is, a proof of concept that shows that it using the equipment that we've offered up as the proof that it can be done. And then that criteria applies to our construction, and then there's a testing process to make sure that it does what it said it was going to do. We apply the exact same approach to odor, and so that's what's underway right now.
One more question for me. I always take over. 28 exhaust stacks. What do those look like? How big, how tall, am I looking at a big porcupine on top of a?
So I think right now, my understanding of the proposed design is that the stacks are 6 feet tall, that they are above the roof line, that they are each 3,000 CFM, and the diameter, I believe, is 14 inches or so. So that's a lot of stacks, but at the same time, there's a lot of air, and I know I've seen worse, but
These won't be visible from the ground. If you recall
Right,
the
that one.
12-foot combustion exhaust that's on the cogeneration, you had to be up at the level, and then you could sort of see what they look like. A 6-foot where they're located within the facility, where it's sort of central. None of them are right on the outside of the facility.
Now, Bill, you were on the call, and Ned was saying that the only way, and correct me if I am interpreting this wrong, the only way that this was gonna work is if the smokestacks were 2.5 times the height of the building. So the 6 feet wasn't gonna work in
Okay.
his opinion, and they were gonna be 2.5 times the height of the building. So,
Okay.
and the building is 30 feet
yeah.
tall?
I can, so I think it's actually, it's either 2.5, I saw that, or 1.5 is 1.5 times the building. That's a number that has been thrown out there. That's a very basic rule of thumb. With that said, in some cases, 1.5 times the height of the building is not gonna be enough to prevent air quality impacts. In some cases, it's gonna be completely unfeasible to implement. So if you have a high-rise building, for example, and you're looking to add a stack on top of a high-rise building, 1.5 times the height of the building is not gonna be something that's possible to implement. Likewise, if you have a very short building, let's say in an urban environment that's surrounded by high-rise buildings, you might have a 30-foot stack on top of a 10 or 12-foot building. That wouldn't necessarily be enough to be able to prevent impacts to surrounding buildings or to the building itself, because essentially that small building and that stack is caught within this giant wake of air due to the massing of the surrounding buildings. So that's not a number or a guideline that we ever use, and that's why we do modeling, because the modeling helps us to figure out what is the height of that stack that we need. In some cases, through the modeling, you might show that you need a taller stack to be able to escape the rooftop recirculation zones that are created as a result of a mechanical penthouse, for example, or mechanical equipment. In some cases, you might show through modeling that you can safely implement a shorter stack. And we'll do modeling to confirm that the health-based air quality standards are being met, just your national ambient air quality standards. But we'll also do modeling to show that odor is also not going to be a problem. So here we're talking about cannabis odor, but when we do dispersion modeling for other types of buildings, like a hospital, for example, you might be putting in a new kitchen and you need to put a kitchen hood there. It's not a regulatory requirement in any way, shape, or form, but when people are cooking at lunch, you don't want the exhaust from that kitchen hood to be coming back into the building intake or to be impacting the neighbors and through operable windows or fresh air intakes or whatnot. So that's the kind of modeling that we'll do as well.
So there are essentially two main components of this project as far as odor goes. One is the negative pressure, and the other is the exhaust emissions controls.
Yep.
Could you sort of talk about each of those concepts and how you'll be managing those?
So the piece that I can speak to is the exhaust portion. So, using the information that we're gonna get from Vander Weil with respect to the exhaust flow rates, we're in the process of just doing the dispersion modeling piece, and we're simulating the footprint of the building, the height, the terrain, and all of the different discharge points that are proposed on the facility with the flow rates for each. And then, under like a full array of meteorological conditions, we're gonna predict what the impacts are gonna be at the surrounding property line. And so it's important, and in fact, that assessment is done for historical meteorological information over the past 5 years. So that's an input to the model. So we're using the meteorological information from the Worcester Airport for the past 5 years, and that's a record of wind directions, wind speed, and so on. And so what ultimately this is gonna give us is, had the facility been there for the past 5 years, what would have been the worst case impact that we could have experienced? And then through that modeling, and we'll get that number. And then what that number is and what we compare that number to is the discussion that we'll have with Ned, because unfortunately, in Massachusetts, there isn't a specific requirement that's out there that says you will not exceed this level of odor. And there's no guide that we've been able to find. There is no regulation specific to odor. And in fact, there are very few states and very few provinces that have that kind of information, that detailed. Odor is not, as annoying as it can be, it is still a nuisance. It doesn't, there's no literature out there that confirms, that suggests that there is actually a health-based impact. Health-based impacts are very well defined, and there are lots of criteria that you have to demonstrate compliance with, and odor is not that way yet. But what we do know is that there is a very well-defined process, as well-defined as it is anywhere right now. There is a well-defined process in Ontario that we could potentially use as a baseline for establishing some kind of protocol for this particular project. So we could use that, instead of reinventing the wheel, we could use that as a baseline for what the project could be achieving. But that's something that we'll wanna talk with Ned about to make sure that there is agreement there on that front. We don't wanna go and do something that he obviously wholeheartedly disagrees with. So there has to be buy-in on both sides. I think something that is justified and substantiated with what we know now in the technical community, and something that he can buy into that is gonna be suitable.
And to be clear, where the new special, the proposed warrant, the approved warrant article for the special permit, where this defines, an otherwise unimpaired person at the property line won't smell it, or however it's written, is the target. The question is, as Sonia's saying, how do we marry that up with a quantifiable standard? So that's, as we believe, is a deliverable that needs to be decided in the next week coming up with Dr. Ostrius.
Yeah, because odors are so subjective that what you may be able to smell, somebody else might not. What you might find objectionable, somebody else might not. So you have to find a happy medium, or you're deciding to decide to the most stringent standard, but that's, in often cases, is not a realistic objective for many reasons and for many different issues. So that's something that I think we'll need to work on.
So maybe just to finish this off is, okay, what's our next step and what's our deliverable that we anticipate? So we've submitted back in August an odor mitigation plan, which is the City of Denver standard for, that's the odor compliance plan. So we put it into that format. It's been reviewed, it's come back with lots of questions. So we've gone back, we've updated that, that was submitted to the planning department yesterday with most of what's in there, but it's a very descriptive plan. So what we've, I believe we've agreed to with Dr. Oster, Ned, is an attachment that can be put to that, which is called design criteria. And the design criteria outlines everything that Sonia just said in a descriptive way, that when construction plans get submitted and they're gonna be approved and we're looking for a big building permit, that whoever the reviewer is can look at the design criteria and make sure that our plans, our mechanical systems comply with that, not just during the design phase, but also what we believe is necessary and what's been proposed by Ned is a beta test, prove that what's written in the spec sheet is what we're gonna see. And then finally, when we get into the commissioning phase of it, like I said, we're not going from 0 to 600,000 square feet of mature canopy overnight. That we do this commissioning testing to make sure that we don't have problems, and if any issue is detected along the way, that there is a constant plan for updating the criteria. If we get through beta and the deep carbon beds need to be bigger, and we'll see that in the peer review, we'll see that, it'll be obvious because this design criteria sets the standard, then we add more deep bed carbon filters and improve the design. If we have to adjust the exhaust airflow because the infiltration rate ends up being different than what the manufacturer of the greenhouse said, then we make that adjustment. But these are all pretty standard parts of the process defined by the design criteria. So I leave it with that. That's what our objective is, to have to you this design criteria that we believe can give the board and the public the confidence that this is industry best management practice for odor.
Do we have board questions?
You said you've worked on multiple cannabis manufacturing facilities in the past. Is it size, scope of what this is currently proposed?
I wasn't personally involved with them, but I have access to all the information and the reports, and I believe that one of them absolutely is of the same scale. I know that there's a couple facilities that were proposed and where we did what we're talking about doing now for your project, where modeling at the proposed stage and figuring out what the impacts are gonna be and working with the design team to make sure that the project is optimized. I believe there's one project that was an existing facility for which we did some testing. So it ranges. We're working on a project right now, I believe, for a facility that is using some cannabis products or cannabis oil. So that's another one that we have underway right now. So.
So the odor, is all the growing. Are there any facilities that are even half the size that your firm has worked on? 500,000 square feet of growing space or anything? Because I've been actually searching for facilities as examples close to 1 million square feet, and I can't find any. So when you said you have experience, are they more than the 100,000? And
I know that there's one project that had 10 growing spaces, or similar to, I guess, what we have. What the sizes of them are, I don't know, but I could look into that information for you guys if that's something that is important. But I mean, we're still talking about a relatively new industry, right? So if you're asking me, can you give me a list of all the hospital projects that you've worked on, I could have lists that are as long as my arms. But this is still relatively new, so there's only a handful really of projects that we've been
no,
in.
I know, all I can say is that the facility that was 156,000 square feet, it took a year. The actual design, the engineering of just odor took a year. So this project, this design for a place that's 8 times bigger, to get it kind of designed and finalized in a couple weeks and to have everybody sign off seems kind of impossible to me.
We
But-
agree with that statement. To be clear, but we're not proposing, so the mechanical design, that level of work, that's a phase that doesn't happen, it shouldn't happen at site plan approval. That's construction plans. Again, when we're doing that, so just to draw the comparable, you talked about a facility, 148,000 square feet, it's negative pressure. Yes, that's the best management practice. It has deep carbon filtration. Yes, that's a best management practice. Bipolar ionization, that's in the closed loop circulation system. Yes.
Separate HVA systems for HVAC
For every
systems
single
for every
room.
single room in the whole facility.
Yes, that's
Okay.
absolutely part of the design. And the exhaust systems, and then I think you were describing HEPA filtration, and that, it's, all of this is, it's certainly spelled out in our odor mitigation plan. It's industry best practices, and it's absolutely part of the design, but to be clear, that, we're not coming here with construction drawings in a couple of weeks, because that really does take time, and that should not be rushed. Yeah, but we do think the design criteria that spells out how all those systems work can be done, and frankly, probably should be done at this point, so that we can have that in front of whoever the reviewer is, whether it's Ned or somebody else, when we get to the building permit phase.
We're just waiting for Ned to sign off. He seems pretty thorough. Not too worried. Do we have other?
I just have one question. The facilities that you have worked on, are they cannabis and are they up and running?
Yes, I believe, yeah, there are, the facilities that I've mentioned are definitely cannabis-grown facilities, and I believe that at least 2 of them are up and running now, yes.
And do you know what size they are?
No, like I
Okay.
said, I could get that kind of information.
If you
it's-
would forward that to me when you
Sure,
get that
yeah.
information.
Do we want to open? Do you have more to?
That's all our major updates for now.
Okay, I can open it up to the residents if they have questions.
Gerard Russell, 63 Old Worcester Road. Just going back to the Mass DOT and the verbal meeting that VGG had with Mass DOT. What I'm trying to understand is, we are to accept a verbal meeting with Mass DOT without having any kind of application submitted to Mass DOT for any kind of waiver application for access? I don't understand how that can be considered a serious attempt at gaining access via Route 20.
We have a letter from Mass DOT that I'm willing to
I can share a copy.
Right, but Madam Chairman, what I'm saying is, VGG has not submitted an application seeking any kind of waiver or permission or to work with Mass DOT for access. Mass DOT is not gonna work with them on what-ifs. They're going to act on a plan, and no plan, as I understand it, has been submitted to Mass DOT. And that tells me that there's no serious effort to have an access on Route 20. Now, what I'm saying, Madam Chairman, is this. I mean, we have the development agreement approved by selectmen allows a dispensary. Now, we all, I think most of us have seen the traffic jams on Route 9 in Leicester. And there's no access on Route 20, apparently, application by VGG. And if at some point the developer says, right now they say no dispensary, but at some point they may say, because the development agreement allows it, we want a dispensary, and access will be via Old Worcester Road. What a nightmare. Maybe VGG could address that?
I got that one.
We're allowed to develop 25% of the site plan. I think we've discussed this in prior meetings. We're developing 25% of the site plan, so we could not add additional facilities. In addition, I think we've stated in prior meetings, we would agree to a condition that says we cannot put a dispensary on this particular project.
He said,
May 25, also, Mr. Gentleman mentioned numerous times design criteria. As it really designed based on criteria, not requirements? Criteria, it means good, bad, beautiful, ugly, something like that. Criteria, it's not the meaning of design. Requirements, you can put numbers, fulfill or fail.
In working with the town's peer review consultant, we do believe that this is the right approach. I'm not sure if there was a more specific question that we can answer. It's a document, you've actually seen the draft of what it is.
I know, I guess the criteria of a system at this point of site plan review is all we can expect. The design,
It is, to be clear, it's a requirements document. A design criteria is the industry name for what the specific document is, so that's what was discussed with the peer engineer, the peer reviewer, and that's what it's called. If the peer review asks us to change the name, I don't see why not. I just don't understand.
well, they're coming up with their plan, and our engineer is saying, is their plan gonna work or not? And he's gonna he's also an engineer, he's a doctor of engineering, a doctor of odor. Consults all over the country. He's gonna put a stamp on saying it's gonna work or it's not gonna work. So if that,
For the system of complexity of this, I wouldn't accept it. I designed aircraft 40 years. If somebody would tell me something like that, excuse me, I couldn't fly on this. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Is it really something solid I can look at? Design criteria. The lady mentioned that the odor is not measurable, right? Excellent. So there is no requirements or way to measure odor. Am I correct?
No, I think,
Yes.
would you like me to answer that? I'm sorry.
so the doctor, so engineers like to say that, we all have different, senses. Some people are more sensitive to some odors, but the board has, we all feel, I can tell that we all feel that we want zero odor, and that will be the requirement, so, thank you. Another? Next question?
Kristen Kastigian, Carroll Hill Road. Mr. Rosen was quoted in the newspaper as saying that VGG would be changing their plan to meet state requirements concerning limited access areas due to the letter they received regarding licensing. How much change is actually allowed? He said that you're currently at 25% of the lot coverage. How much, once you approve the plan, how can he just change the plan? How does that work?
I can answer
Bill
that.
or Mark,
Well, if I could answer that?
Sure.
So I'm talking about the layout of the rooms within a building. We're not changing anything on the site plan approval that you would be approving.
So the footprint's the same, you mean?
The footprint's the same, all of the mechanicals are the same. The only difference is where the rooms within the head house, how they're configured internally, and that's the only change.
so if there was more than that, they would have to come back for.
Yeah, if there were changes to the site, design, layout, parking,
Correct.
drainage, things of that sort, you'd have to come back,
Correct.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve Corona, 17 Old Worcester Road. Follow up on Kristen's question, on the Department of Public Health letter that came out. Is the planning board allowed to approve a model that's not allowed by state law?
I would,
Based on the tenant issue part?
I'll answer and you guys can correct me. I believe that it's their risk if they want to risk the design for something that will or will not be in compliance. It's not our responsibility, but you can correct me on that.
I think a standard condition of anything of this magnitude, whether it's a widget factory or a marijuana grow facility, would be compliance with all federal and state laws. So that's a precondition before the certificate of occupancy is issued. They're gonna have to show the building inspector that they've got what they need.
And a follow-up on that, we knew about the Cannabis Commission's ruling on, and thoughts on tenants in 100,000 square feet. We knew about this back in May. Us were in the know, and we did some research on it. Clearly, VGG had to know about those rules before. This letter could not have come as a surprise to you. And if it did, how do you plan on getting around it?
So there are two regimens that are applicable to the cultivation of marijuana. There's the CCC and the DPH. This is a requirement of the DPH, not of the CCC. The CCC does not have this requirement. So one methodology would be to only cultivate under CCC and not DPH. The second methodology would be to meet with the DPH or the CCC when they take over for the DPH on December 23rd and provide them greater detail with what we're looking at doing and ask them to re-review it and come back to us with further feedback. And the third option would be to make some minor modifications to the rooms within the buildings to come into what they believe is a better methodology within the buildings.
But I was under the impression that the tenant model was based more on just an economic part, where
No.
the CCC wanted 20 smaller growers, 100,000 square foot cap, just to be able to keep the.
Yeah, that's not the case. They've approved million-square-foot facilities within the Commonwealth already. If you look at Freetown, they've already approved that. They have no, but he's talking medical, he's talking DPH, so thank you. I'm sorry, the DPH has approved million-square-foot models already. So it's not prohibited to have a million-square-foot model.
Providing the town is 100% behind you and everything else, then they're probably more, the CCC would be more likely to go along with it.
No questions? Yes, sir.
Brett Moore, 15 Amaroq Road. On these, this is more directed at the lady that deals with the smells there. Are we changing the, I'm just reading some articles about, to mitigate these smells, they'll change the molecular structure of the smell, so we can't smell it. But the big thing I'm reading here in Colorado is people are still having problems with breathing whatever those fumes are that aren't good for us. Is that, how do we deal with that? And there are studies on this, and they say that there's not a lot of information on what the smell is, and some of these chemicals aren't even known if they cause cancer or not. There's not enough data on it yet. Obviously, like she said, there's not many places like this even built yet. So I'm just wondering, is that what we're gonna do, is change the structure of the smell so we can't smell it, but we're still gonna breathe whatever that smell is?
Can I answer? No, the only part that we're gonna be looking after is figuring out or estimating what the odor strength is going to be, and then agreeing with Ned what is an acceptable level of odor, because there isn't anything published or in place in Massachusetts that dictates what that number should be. So we're not touching, we're not doing anything to the odor strength itself coming out of the facility. The odor is the odor depending on whatever is happening inside the building. So we're just essentially going to be forecasting into the future to see through the modeling tool to predict what the strength of the odor would be at the property level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you're not gonna be changing it molecularly, so.
No.
So that leads to the second part of my question, how accurate, is there a plus or minus factor with these modelings that you're doing?
It is only as good as the information that we're provided, right? And so it's important throughout the process to make sure that we're kept updated of the design changes. And that's not specific to this project, this is for all the projects that we work on. So oftentimes we'll do something earlier on, and then later on, in the design development stage or in the construction document stage, we'll be provided updated information and asked to check that the impacts are still okay, and we'll do that. So I don't know, we haven't done any validation per se, and I don't know that there's research out there in the technical field that supports that. Because to be able to say, for example, to monitor air quality impacts, we're basing our recommendations on the worst case possible impacts. And so when we're gonna be predicting what the odor level is at the most sensitive impact location, we're not gonna use the mildest impacts to inform the design recommendations, right? We're gonna use the very worst impact for the very worst wind direction, wind speed, and so on. So that we're making sure that the design, if all the stars align and we're, we're operating under these very worst case conditions, that the design can handle those conditions and will still be able to provide acceptable impacts of the property line. So to be able to go and say, what are the impacts on an ongoing basis, you'd have to set up stations and whatnot to monitor those impacts, and it's just not something that's feasible to do, because you don't know when is it gonna be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You just don't have that, hence why we do the modeling. The modeling is really the tool that we have at our disposal to be able to figure out what is actually gonna happen.
Right, so would you model a 100,000 square foot facility and just multiply it by 10? Is that how you calculate this? Because you don't have a lot of data for 1 million square foot facilities.
We have all we need. We have the footprint of the building is important, obviously. But really what it comes down to is how many stacks do we have? Where are they located? How tall are the stacks? What's the flow rate? What's the exit velocity? Because you've got this plume of air that's gonna come out of the stack, and is it gonna be coming out like this? Is it the discharge velocity low enough that it's just gonna come right back down on the roof under a stronger wind condition? Those are all the things that we model as part of that process, but the information that I just listed here is really what we need as a baseline to be able to predict what the impacts are, and taking into account, like I said before, the meteorological information, the terrain, the boundaries of the site. Those are other parameters that are put into the modeling to be able to estimate what the impacts are gonna be.
Well, I think we'd all agree that modeling is helpful, but it's not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the World Trade Center towers weren't supposed to fall down under any condition. The big bridge in San Francisco wasn't supposed to collapse with a 7.3 earthquake coming down, which isn't a huge earthquake in California. I lived there 40 years. 3 Mile Island. Bunch of examples where this modeling failed, and that concerns me.
Perhaps there is no modeling that was done, though. I don't know, but.
I know there's modeling on the Titanic. There's a lot of modeling.
All right,
So at some point,
It scares me.
we're gonna ask our expert to prepare modeling and a protocol for modeling, and we're gonna ask the town's peer review consultant to confirm that it's an acceptable methodology.
It's helpful.
Kristen?
I have one more question. So today, this is the first time that I believe we've heard about 28 exhaust stacks. How did we get to 28?
As part of of the odor engineer's review and what would take care of the odor.
So these are in
Right.
addition to the 5 cooling stacks for the cogen, right? So we're really, so there's 28 facility top stacks that we don't know the height yet because we have to do modeling of the emissions to figure out the height, right? And we won't know what that's gonna be until you have the construction plans, because those have the machinery inputs that they need to do the modeling, right? So what I'm trying to say is, to this point, I think most of us, based on the VGG drawings and the renditions, the pretty golf course pictures, we thought there was 1 tall exhaust stack and then 5 cooling towers, and then today we showed up and there's 28, but we don't know how tall, in addition to 5 for cooling, and what else? What else does this look like? That's kind of a big surprise, isn't it? I don't know.
I thought it was when I heard it.
How did you get to 28? Why isn't it 30? How come it's not 20? Why
It's
is it 15?
this was just a result of the conversation between the engineers, and it isn't even final. I think we'll have more of a final of that order plan on January 2nd after more discussion. I know that they've been working diligently for with hours and hours and hours of just phone calls, so.
So these stacks are for exhaust from the buildings. These aren't for combustion from the cogen, correct? There's a whole nother exhaust stack for the cogen?
Yes.
Okay, just making.
Yeah, and we've delivered the renderings that showed the 4 cogeneration exhaust stacks that are on the head house. They were very, very difficult to see. They're 12 feet higher than the ridge line. I don't think we could produce a rendering that could show a 6-foot stack in the locations where these are. You could not see, you can't see it from the ground.
So these stacks gonna be on the greenhouses? or
On
these-
top of the greenhouses.
On top of the greenhouses.
Has anyone communicated odor to noise in terms of these stacks? Is Chris Menge aware of this? Because he's doing a protocol based upon an earlier version of the plan.
So,
Somebody needs to make that connection.
yeah, so as part of the proof of concept is to identify the pieces of equipment. This is what our Jim Barnes, and this is what Mike Thornton's doing right now in the Netherlands, is identifying what specific pieces of equipment, what CFM they're gonna operate at, what the stack height, the starting point, and I think we've agreed with Dr. Ostovic that the stack height of 6 feet is what we're gonna use for the modeling, and we'll use that for the noise proof of concept as well.
I just wanted to make sure there's communication between the two
Oh, yes.
expertise
Source.
areas here.
Not Steve.
Margaret Russell, 63 Old Worcester Road. I just want to thank Sonia for being the first person to tell us there will be a smell coming out of this plant, because for the past few months, we've all been told it's internal, you won't smell anything. So thank you for that. And you talk about health-based air quality impacts. What about nuisance-based air quality impacts?
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
Well, I think odor is not related to health, it's related to, it's definitely a nuisance, and you don't want it to be related to a loss of enjoyment of your home, for example. But that's the difference between health and a nuisance. Health, you really have to do something about it because somebody's health might be compromised. And so that's a very minimum standard or performance that you need to achieve. Nuisance is, it's not fun, but do we need to do something about it, yes or no? It's a matter of preference. In some cases, we'll be involved on some projects where, the design criterion that's established by the owner will be, I want no odor. And in some cases, we'll work with other owners that'll say, the frequency of odor is low enough, that's fine by me. I'm willing to accept that level of impact, that level of risk. It all depends. It's a nuisance. It's something that may be not fun, but it might be something that you can live with. If the odors are happening at midnight and all your windows are closed, then maybe it's not that bad, but if you're trying to enjoy your home, then but
I would just like to echo what Madam Chairman said. I think 0 odor would be acceptable to the neighborhood. I don't think anything other than that would be acceptable.
And it is doable, because I witnessed it.
Roger Cloutier, 17 Coburn Road. Madam Chairman, this question is to you. You went out to North Brookfield and you looked at that facility. How tall were the stacks there? I'm just curious. Did you notice stacks? Are they tall?
You couldn't see on top of the building. You could see a big square, well, after they showed me pictures, because they brought up Google Earth and showed me pictures, you could see a big 8x8. They also use electricity. They're off the grid. So they have a 8x8 square, were you in that conversation?
No, I didn't see that.
It was like an 8x8 square box that kind of did everything up top there. I didn't really see any other, maybe there was some short towers, but you could see nothing from the ground at all.
In my 41 years of manufacturing, typically the old manufacturing, you saw these tall brick stacks. And the idea was to get the smoke and to get the smell up high enough that it would dissipate. And people on the ground wouldn't get it, they wouldn't smell it. So I mean, you have a kind of a conflict here, and maybe not, but you want to keep it nice and low so people don't see it, but then you also want it high enough so that they don't get the odor.
They cleaned out all their odor before it left their building.
Well, but I mean,
So there was,
you got to vet
so there was
somehow.
whatever they did, they cleaned out all their odor before it left the building. That's what,
And
that's,
there's 28 stacks.
that's what, they have they had a design, they had engineers sit and design the system so no odor left the building. So there was no odor because nothing outside, because nothing left the building. So,
And I guess it's Steve Corona, 17 Olds Road. I guess, Madam Chair, that was my follow-up question with Mr. Russell. Is that the odor mitigation plan we're listening to isn't talking about 0 odor outside the building. It's talking about wind speeds from Worcester Airport and the travel of wind and how it's going to dissipate. It's not, I haven't heard her mention 0 emissions of odor.
and Ned knows what we're looking for. We're in communication, so.
So what I heard, if I may, what Sonia said is your information is only good as the information you're provided. So you've got some level of exhaust or discharge coming out of these exhaust vents. How, back in other words, smelly the air is depends on how good the filtration system is. And your modeling, depending on what they're telling you, is produced outside of that ventilation system. If it differs from that, that's gonna affect your modeling. But you're using the numbers or the information that's provided by them. Is that what I hear?
Precisely, and is part of the design criteria is a commissioning phase to validate every aspect of mechanical system as we go through this.
And your plan is to remove all those odors before it goes to the ventilation system? Is the goal?
Descriptively, yes.
Okay.
When we hear things like all and none, and, Dr. Ostrovich I'm gonna let him answer that question, but I think I know what he'd say.
He said it was impossible,
Sure,
but what I witnessed, there was, the
No
human
noticeable odor to a reasonable
nose could not
human
smell,
notice.
even when you entered the buildings to the lunchroom, for example.
Yes, we've been in lots of facilities that were designed with odor mitigation best management practices in line, which list all 6 things that you've witnessed and we've kind of talked about. And you could walk up to facilities that incorporated none of that, and it's a big problem.
And they had a disadvantage, they already had a built building. You guys are designing your building to work with this, so it actually should be easier for you. So, next question?
Rep. 115 Hammer Rock Road. We've talked about these 28 stacks and that odor. What about odor or health hazards coming from the cooling tower, the industrial cooling tower? Looking into with that. So I know they're gonna be discharging, and I brought this up 3 meetings ago, and I talked to Bill a couple weeks ago, and this was supposed to be on the agenda, I thought, maybe I misunderstood you, Bill, but.
I asked Brett, but Mike Thornton was out of town for this meeting, so it didn't come up.
But I mean, it's gonna be, phosphoric acid, it's gonna be coming out of that thing, going into the atmosphere, bromines, bicarbonates. And I have found there's a lot of information about people within a half mile, the first half mile, to an industrial cooling tower with all kinds of respiratory problems, specifically non-traveling engineers disease. And we've got 3 schools right here. That would be my first question. I did call, I was able to get a hold of somebody at the EPA, and they had some suggestions. I don't know that everybody's even looked at that stuff. One of them was, don't build it. Well, that might or might not happen. Was to change the size of the facility. That was another thing. And then there's some kind of underground cooling towers, a thermo something. You'd have to research it. I'm sure these guys know what it is. It's a little more costly, but it's much safer. And nobody's addressed any of that. And like I said, I brought it up. I know it was 5 weeks ago the first time I brought it up. They got put off. I came specifically to you. You're the one that told me to talk to Bill, and then it's still getting put off. And it's the health hazard, and I don't know that anybody's really looking
And
into that.
I've addressed my concern with I feel like I know nothing about the power plant, and everybody keeps on telling me, well, that's about the state.
Well, I
You
don't know
get
if this is the power plant, though, isn't it? They're gonna use it for the power plant, they're also gonna use it for whatever kind of refrigeration system. I'm still in that cooling tower, dissipate a lot of things.
Bill, is there, I know the information you got from the Ms. Stanley at Mass DEP, that has a little bit to do with this. So, lucky enough at this tour, I was able to run into of the chief of air quality from Mass DEP, and she had sent some information to the board. I think it kind of got lost in the mix, maybe, because she resent it to me about her basic review. She only saw a very draft, like a drafty type plan. Do you have copies of that? What she sent you
No, I
yet?
don't, no.
So I will share, I'm sure you guys, you've met with Ms. Stanley, I believe.
Ms. Stanley, yes.
So, I'll actually bring that for January 2nd. So whatever's on her stuff, I'll forward that to you to get ready for questions on that.
Yes.
I actually just received it. I'm not sure why it wasn't addressed by this board already, but it was some specific concerns about the power plant, some lack of information, some adjustments she thought. So I will bring that up and share it. In fact, we can post it on the, to let you guys add it.
Quick question. I thought that somewhere along the lines in the site plan review that the Board of Health would give you guys some sort of comments, maybe even on that, like Legionnaires situation, do they comment on these plans or give you some feedback or have a hearing or anything?
Bill?
Jim Philbrook came to the last meeting and commented on the proposed odor mitigation
So
plans.
that was the Board of Health input?
Yes,
I
and
didn't know.
the chairman also made some comments at that meeting.
Okay, I'll watch it. I didn't know.
And the director was on the phone call that we had with the odor technicians.
And
this
he
week.
was all on board for zero odor for that, but the health issues. I had also asked for the calculation of why we needed the 18 megawatt power plant, and I know you guys are working on that, so I just want to remind you that we're still waiting for that. I just want to see, just, if we can go with something smaller, obviously, something smaller is much preferred. I'm sorry, you can answer me. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, it was to comment on an earlier comment you had made, and yes, we will do it. We actually, I think we brought that with us to the last meeting where Mike Thornton is the one that I'd like
To deal with.
but he will be able to answer that. I think it just didn't come up and we forgot to.
Yeah,
so-
on our side
so-
too, so.
So with respect to Ms. Stanley and the DEP process, and here's another thing we had submitted but we didn't talk about at the last meeting, was a very extensive permitting process that happens after we hopefully have an approved site plan. The DEP emissions permitting is a a massive level of effort. There's a tremendous amount of information that's required. We're doing a full permitting process with them. Again, Mike Thornton, Frank Lilly, who are not here tonight, would be able to describe that. But that level of detail it should be no surprise that Ms. Stanley didn't see it. We had what's called a pre-application meeting with her and the entire team, 8 DEP division officials, division heads officials, to talk through the details of this. And we do believe we have an understanding of what's gonna be required and how we're gonna meet those standards.
I mean, one of the things she said to me was, why didn't they put that power plant in loading docks over by 20? Why would they put it, where they put it? It just made sense.
Closer to the houses.
Why wouldn't it be further away from the houses as possible for sound purposes, because they're loud? That was like just, I mean, and that was in conversation, honestly, we were touring the plant together, so.
Sure, so that's exactly, so in the proof of concept, it's a good question, a great comment. In the proof of concept, with the background noise level understood and understanding what equipment's gonna be where, that's what's studied to make sure that we can meet that. And if it is where it's proposed, it is where it's proposed for a reason, but the noise level can be mitigated. If it can't be mitigated, it would have to be moved to a place where it could be mitigated and be below the 5 dB design threshold criteria.
Madam Chairman, Gerard Russell, Worcester Road. I have 2 remaining questions. The first deals back to traffic and the number of employees that VGG has given as 300 or thereabouts. What I'm not clear on is the 300 based upon employees of VGG, or does that include all of the 6 tenants as well?
It's for the entire facility.
As a follow-up, Dr. Goldstein had a proposal for a similar-sized operation in North Andover in the old Lucent building, 1.1 million square feet, and he was telling the people of North Andover that there would be anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 employees in this facility. I'm not getting the math.
In North Andover, there were other components to the project, including large medical research and development facilities.
When I was in North Brookfield, so now you guys have some insight, and I'm comparing everything now, of course. But, so they 80 employees at 156,000 square feet. It's the same deal, no retail, just all growing. The picking and stuff, everything's done by machines, so there's less humans involved. So they have these machines that pick buds and everything else. But when I calculated it out, I calculated at that scale to be, take away the admin staff, because you don't want to double the admin, but about 450 or so. So, and you say 300, but in a place that's moving, it's 80 with 156,000. So it's a little higher, just from my, me just calculating it out.
Yeah, automation in different systems, growing techniques are key to this.
My last question, Madam Chairman, is about the process that is used for processing the cannabis. We haven't heard anything, at least I haven't, I have attended all of the meetings, about the chemicals that would be used, or if there would be chemicals or gases that would be used to process the cannabis, and what kind of firefighting precautions have been taken in terms of codes, sprinklers. I met with the fire chief within the past, I think, 2 weeks, and he said he has yet to receive, now maybe in the past 2 weeks he has, hopefully he has, but he said he has not received any plans, nothing from VGG. One of his concerns is sprinklers, but he's received nothing. And I'm just curious if VGG has submitted a plan with regard to fire safety, processing, sprinklers, availability of water, where is that water gonna come from, all of that. I'm just curious if VGG has done this with the fire department.
Normally, we do get a sign-off, we get a letter from them, saying, you know, good to go or not. Did we get that already, or?
Well, Chief Knopf did come to a meeting and spoke about the project at one of our hearings.
That's my question.
But did he?
He said he had no info. We heard
That's right,
that were-
right. So we haven't seen anything further since that time.
So has VG submitted anything in writing to the fire department?
I believe there's confusion about the building permit process and site plan approval process. The fire department and all the departments have seen and commented on, I shouldn't say all departments commented on, but we have received comments from the fire department and the building commissioner jointly on the site plan review. We discussed water, and basically the process that I believe we're hearing is part of the building process, part of the construction design is a code review, which is first understanding, okay, what's gonna be the requirement for this facility based on different occupancy areas, how's the building gonna be split up and firewalled, followed by, so we have an architect who's not been, I think he actually came to the very first meeting, but we're just so far ahead of where the architect gets engaged with the town officials for building permit sign off.
So we're just really worried about that they know where they're getting their water from, so the water is going to be available for such systems.
Right, so the water department, can supply the water that's required, once that line becomes active on Old Worcester Road.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, I don't want to test your patience here, but what I understand here is VGG is asking this board to give approval to this project with so many unanswered questions. And one of the biggest questions, I think, is safety, at least it is from my concern. There was a fire at the Charlton Orchard 5 years ago, and the Charlton Fire Department could not put that fire out because of equipment malfunctions, availability of water, so many unanswered questions that this is farcical. Thank you.
I have a question or comment. Let's say 5 years and if 1 year in the future, we cut the ribbon, everything started, and then failed this brilliant criteria, or this sophisticated software modeling failed also. Who's responsible to fix all this?
It would be.
Madam, wait a second. Can we legally write down something that like we buy any tools, anything, 1 year warranty? Can we legally have something that town could request from these people to fix the problem?
It would all go through our Board of Health. So any, are you talking about the odor?
Zoning inspection too.
So in zoning, so it would be out of our hands, it would be with the inspectors, but we had a lengthy phone call with, are you talking about odor specifically?
Odor,
Or
noise.
anything in-
Sure.
Anything.
Well, first of all,
Noise, anything could happen, lights.
all of that is Board of Health and Kurt
And state.
and the state. But if, say, the whole thing went out of business, and we would require a bond.
Citizens are not protected, basically what you're saying.
No, I don't think that's the case.
No.
There's a number of different ways to ensure compliance. Noise is probably the simplest. You buy a handheld sound meter, you train the building inspector, and away you go.
Yes.
If they're not meeting their standard, then the building inspector has all kinds of tools, cease and desist orders. There are criminal
No, we
and
heard last
non-criminal
meeting about orders.
penalties.
Sorry to interrupt, that orders are not accepted. People keep calling, nothing happens.
Orders
That's why
is
I'm asking,
the most
town,
difficult.
as our representative, will sue them or something.
Well, we find them.
Well, I think the odor is by far the most difficult. So we're relying upon Ned to come up with something that's,
There are plenty of things. CO2, never talk about it. Vibration. People never stand next to this core jam. I stand 100 meters out of it. Believe me, you will hear and you will feel it. So there are plenty of unknown. That's why I'm asking, why you, as our representative, put something in this agreement that at least first year they will fix all the problems?
No, not fix all the problems in the first year, fix all the problems whenever they occur, not 1 year, 5 years, 20 years down the road. This is standards in place that have to be consistently measured and observed. So noise is the simplest. So you get a phone call, I'm just using it as an example because most people can grasp what we're talking about. You get a complaint about noise, there's a handheld sound meter, you go out to the site, you take a measurement, if it's 10 dBA above the ambient, that's not what we permitted, it's 5 dBA above the ambient. So there's a wealth of remedies available at that point to the building inspector. He can issue a cease and desist until they bring it into compliance, he can criminally prosecute them if they don't fix it over time.
But you are given responsibility to complain to us. Town should do that. On my opinion, the representative, why should they do this?
You like want
The
me to
town
go
should
out and do
monitor all
physical
those
inspections?
aspects of it.
Yes, you have inspectors, a lot of them.
Well, that's what a lot of this is gonna come in by citizen complaint, I would think, although the building inspector will probably stop by and inspect when he thinks it's
Last meeting,
necessary.
remember about the order, and he said, "Hey, we have 600 complaints, nothing happened. 600, nothing. They don't like to spend money, believe me.
He makes a good case for how are you gonna enforce it? Do we even have ordinances with teeth? Do we have fines? Do we have time limits? Is that a local thing that we should be passing?
And then
There's a state penalty provision.
For noise?
No, for zoning violations. $300 per day, each day a separate offense. There's also a code violation provision in the state law, which is $1,000 a day, each day a separate offense. So there's teeth. I'm gonna look right now at what you have in your file, because I know exactly where it is, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was just curious.
Name and address,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, yes. Candace Sutherland, 34 Brackett Hill Road, in Charleston. And I toured Garden Remedies Fitchburg facility yesterday. And one of the things that I noticed is kind of like Monsanto would have airlocks going in. Well, at the facility, at the grow facility, they also had like an airlock where I walked in and I was in the suit, like with a zipper and the hat and booties. And when I walked in, you know, all the air, you know, everything was blown off of me. And when I walked in, and then when I walked out, you know, I couldn't smell anything outside either. And one of the things that I thought was really cool that I'd like to see implemented would be that they were doing water reclamation, and you know, they were showing me these humongous vats of water that they were reusing, and they were telling me that I don't know if I have the numbers wrong, but it's like 14,000 being reclaimed just through osmosis, just even in the building. And they told me they were only using 60 gallons a day. Now, it's a smaller facility in Fitchburg with Garden Remedies, but I just thought that was really cool to use very little water.
So we don't get involved with that internal design system.
Well, we
Yeah.
do, and that's what they are proposing, is they have a full water
Yeah,
reclamation
because they're
process.
renting the buildings in Fitchburg, and they've managed to retro them
This-
where you can't smell anything outside, and I know this is gonna be new construction, so. yeah.
Dan, do you want to speak to that?
We agree, that's the design.
That's part of the plan.
Right, no,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
I mean, we
Yeah.
look at the outside catch, I
And-
mean, but
Yeah, because I would
And-
think with
and-
everything being new and, you know, that you'd be even more efficient.
Yes, exactly, and on top of that, the source of the water is still, for irrigation, is primarily rainwater. For the water that does have to be made up every day, this is how it's commonly done in a lot of commercial, large-scale agriculture.
yeah, I was told by the grower that he says there's going to be so much waste when you cleanse that water from the rainwater, because there's so many chemicals and stuff that are bad for growing, that there will be a huge amount of waste. But I know that you're dealing with water and sewer to make sure that that waste is being disposed of properly.
Yes.
On the fine, in your zoning bylaw, it's woefully inadequate, and you might think about putting a zoning article on Springtown meeting. It's $50 a day. The state law is $300 a day, so it's a simple,
$50 a day.
it's a simple one-word deletion and another 300 substituted for 50, but that's what you have right now, is $50
Is
a
that a
day.
max at 350?
The statute states 300 a day.
But at a town bylaw, we could go above that if we have.
No, because the statute says up to $300.
Can we put that on our agenda?
Sure.
That's in section,
We will put that on our agenda and make sure, and
that's right now 7173, so.
But then that would apply to anyone, any
Yes.
developers or
Yes.
anyone that were late.
Everybody always has updated to the 300. Everybody around you probably has already done this, so
it's
you're not
not
doing
yours,
anything
we are
unusual.
working on updating our whole entire zoning bylaw to make sure everything is up, modern, so this might be something that we
Well, you can also add a provision while you're at it, I'm sure Bill can find you one, it's easy enough, on non-criminal disposition.
We have that already.
To get the $300, you have to go to court, but you can hand out tickets, if you will, under non-criminal.
Okay. Additional question?
But during a remedy time, they could pay their $300 a day for 5 years and possibly be cheaper than remedy that.
There's actually a Memphis restaurant in the airport, where you walk past it and it billows smoke out into the hallway. And I stopped and I said, what's going on here? They pay $1,000 a day fine, and it draws a crowd. But the building inspector here has cease and desist powers. He can go to court, he can get an injunction, or he can just issue a cease and desist, and that would shut it down, which is a much more powerful remedy.
Yes.
I mean, so you can see, that was done at when 508 was having their issues, so it does get done. And they're not afraid to use that power in town. Additional?
Just got a quick thing, Ken Howard on Worcester Road. Back to the DPH thing for a second. From what I read in the paper, they said that they wanted Attorney Cohen was talking about how they wanted to separate, the rooms inside and whatnot. In the paper, they said they were trying to prevent loss and theft. So wouldn't that mean that, let's say if there's 7 entities in there, they're all their own thing? Wouldn't each one of those have to have its own shipping docks? Wouldn't that change the outside of the building?
So that's an important point with regard to a couple of things that I'm hearing, because there's going to be further approvals that other agencies have to make, and that's obviously in the same genre. The site plan is the site plan. It's gonna have if it is approved, it will have a condition in it that says if the board deems any change to be substantial, they have to come back. Plans have to mesh. You can't have one plan for this and another plan for that. So that will be monitored carefully by the building commissioner, and if he sees that they're making changes as a result of a state permit, then they have to come back and match that in the site plan. Not that anybody wants to come back, but that's the rule.
Yes, sir.
Armando Sedano, 27 Old Worcester Road. With all this traffic going on, Old Worcester Road and Walton Station Road is already a mess as it is. How is that they gonna be responsible for paving and stuff like that?
This is another good point. We haven't seen Jennifer in a long time. There's, in the TIAS that GPI prepared, there are a host of self-suggested conditions that they've come up with. I don't see a solid list of those. I don't see Jen's concurrence with them or Jen's additions to them. I think Jen needs to be contacted and given a deadline to get us her shopping list of mitigation here, soup to nuts.
Make sure.
Sure.
And we can send Jen our summary list of what we believe all the conditions that were laid out in the traffic report and additional ones that we've added on top of that, repairs of the road, we can send that to her in the morning.
Yeah, and I like every other consultant that we've got working over the Christmas week. We need her sign off on this.
Right, we have a lot of work to do before the next meeting where we have to make the decision. So we need VGG teams, final reports, peer reviewed by our consultants, with their recommendations to the planning board, so that we can work that all into a decision.
Well, Attorney Rosen and I were talking about that in the hallway, so here's what we came up with, just for everybody in the audience and the board. We would like the VGG team to have its material ready to give to our peer reviewers by the 21st, and that's a Friday. And then, obviously, they're working together, so there shouldn't be a lack of collaboration here. We would like our review team to, if possible, concur and fix or tweak or whatever you want to do, and give us a best estimate of where this is going on the 28th, so that the board members can read it over the weekend and come in here on the 2nd with an understanding of where we're going. And I really, since I think that traffic is such a serious issue here, that Jen really needs to be given a timely reminder to do that now, rather than later.
I don't know, it just seems kind of crazy to me that we're not doing a separate, Route 20, egress for, Charlton Orchards, because, I mean, like, where I live too, I mean, we have Whitewater, we have all the other kind of polluting businesses in the BEP, and, but they have a separate entrance, and, yeah, I mean, without the separate entrance, it really does, impede on the neighborhood, and it's right there, that's what makes it so much sense, maybe, is having it right there on Route 20. But yeah, if we go all the way in, and like the gentleman said too, Morton Station where the school is, that's always, everybody's always cutting through there to, get to Market Basket or Buffalo Dam, and, I don't know, I don't understand why they really can't do that. Is it because of the topography?
It's because of
I guess I should have read ahead.
Is the Ecotech letter in the?
You say
It's
west,
on-
right,
online.
you mean
Online.
west, like that's where the wetlands are, and so like a bridge would need to be done?
There's a
You can't
letter.
do anything over wetlands.
There's a letter that the town's wetland consultant, which is Ecotech, Inc., wrote to Bill on November 28th, 2018.
Is that on the website?
Yeah.
I'll read it,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry, I should
And
have
they're,
prepared.
they're just saying it's gonna be, they're not saying that it's gonna be impossible, they're saying that it's going to be very difficult.
Well,
Really, I feel it's something that really should be done.
Well, Ecotech is your consultant on wetland matters. It's the town's consultant.
Right, right.
So he says, as to one of the alternatives, I do not consider this to be viable, and as to the second one, he's a little bit less pessimistic, but.
Right. Our engineer isn't saying that the road's not gonna be packed. What she's saying is that the road can safely handle all of that traffic.
Oh, I know it probably could, but, it's like, it kinda needs its own entrance, I guess. I mean, you already have the BEP right there, maybe you just open it, you have the U-turn, but I'm not an engineer. But I can sense too, yeah, without that exit, it kinda, really seems like it's really gonna add to traffic.
It is.
too much.
Can the board condition the number of employees per shift? Is that something that's reasonable?
Well, I think it directly relates to the traffic study that's been done. So if the traffic study can accommodate 300 and it's 700, then we need to at least do a better traffic study. So the GPI needs to verify that that's what they looked at, and Jen needs to help us take that into account.
Because, they look at,
Sure.
they're not looking at, they're looking at safety. Is there a safety issue, and can the road physically handle it?
Sure.
And the answer is yes. We all live in Charlton, and we understand just what that means. Try getting on to, when Bay Path School comes out and the school start, you're stuck there for sometimes, 8 minutes. The other day it was 8 minutes for me with all the cars. So it's, in our little town, that's a long time to wait with our little road. But we are,
So we will have to condition times of shift changes
we'll
and
have
things
to
like that.
start
We'll look
thinking
at it.
about that over our Christmas, Christmas morning when you open your present.
I have one last comment. So there's one other fundamental issue in this whole project that I'd just like to bring up. The license being requested is for manufacturing. The facility's parking, as outlined in the traffic study, is enough for manufacturing, not agriculture. The amount of exhaust that the place needs, 28 of this, 5 of that, a big tall this, is also manufacturing. The fact that Mr. Rosen and Mr. Leary are pointing out that they'll keep the number of employees down due to all the mechanization that they'll do within this is also manufacturing. The fact that people have to suit up before they can go in and shower because it has to be sanitary for pharmaceutical manufacturing, it really never fit under any of our zoning because it's manufacturing. it's not agriculture. So I just wanna point out the fundamental flaw to this whole thing, and, that's all I have to say, thank you.
So sorry to interrupt.
I always have my bedtime. I'd like residents to know the date of the next public hearing. I've got a couple seconds to.
January 2nd,
Is it, that's it,
January
tonight?
2nd, 2019 will be the final, the decision, the vote will be had, and
Thank you very much.
Andrei, 25 Worcester Road. Last meeting, the pipe off Route 20 to Old Worcester Road was under investigation, am I right? I asked question about this 18-wheelers trailers, and somebody told that you will investigate what the rate of this this pipe.
The weight rating for the drainage pipe, I think is good.
did someone,
Is
did
it
we
12
look
ton
into
or
that?
14?
I think we're waiting for the revised plan to get to Mike. Andre,
We're waiting for the engineer.
But it does affect the 30 big trucks coming, right? If it's lower than it could be, how they will get into the facility?
Right, there was the question to me, on the trailer trucks,
Okay.
getting up there and the weight. The cement trucks, I don't really know how heavy they are, but are they
Heavy.
heavy enough to mess up a
80,000 pounds.
80,000 pounds? Is that gonna be okay? Is there gonna be a lot of them? So,
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, can we don't understand which, this is a culvert, it's under Old Worcester Road?
I think it's the one heading, if you leave the site and you head towards the center of town via Old Worcester Road. Correct?
No, where's that?
Yeah.
Old Worcester Road, entering Route 20.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Right by Berlin Games?
yeah, there's
Okay,
that-
sorry.
there's that.
Okay, confusion.
Great, thank you.
When you
Okay.
turn onto, Old Worcester Road from 20 from that light, there's that little
There's a culvert there.
culvert, bridge thing?
Yeah.
Culvert. I didn't even think about that. I totally forgot about that. Can we, I don't know who has to look at that, I would highway,
yeah, probably the highway
and
superintendent.
can we also, I don't know if that's something that Mike would need to.
I'll ask Mike about it, see what he
Just get their
recommends.
opinion,
Right.
just make sure we're safe.
If it's gonna collapse, I need the mitigation.
Right? Yeah, we went through this, with the, is a cement truck heavier than a trailer truck? I guess
Yes.
depending on what's in the
Yes, but I
build.
mean, I think that that's such a commonly traveled road by large vehicles. And I think that
I
then,
don't think there's no restrictions on it now, so I don't
Yeah.
think it would be a
Be an
problem.
issue.
but
We just wanna
Just
double
check.
check.
There would be
to make sure.
restrictions if it can
Yeah.
handle that.
Again, 25 Old Worcester Road. You know this brewery, tree house, and the wetland. It was everything wetland before they start building. Is it possible to find out what was the acreage of wetland they survived? If it's more than 6,000, why we cannot do it here like they did there?
I don't remember what happened.
The Conservation Commission would have that information.
that's-
Let me just read what Ecotech said, so that we're all on the same page.
The trees house?
One of the alternatives, the direct access alternative, would require crossing the widest part of the swamp and would likely result in more than 5,000 square feet. I'll just get to the punchline here. This is your consultant. I do not consider this to be a viable alternative.
Oh, sir, I understand that.
But let me finish. The other access alternative would hopscotch over the wetlands and stream using existing uplands as much as possible. The alternative may allow for less than 5,000 square feet, and therefore be permitted as a discretionary alteration. In theory, the only wetland-related permit would be an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. This is the best available alternative for the northwesterly part of the site, although permitting cannot be guaranteed because the Concom also operates under a mandate to avoid and minimize wetlands impacts where possible.
If I could add, in the memo that was submitted to the town and was just passed out, includes our we followed up on that, because we came to the same conclusion. If it could be under 5,000 square feet, then of impact on the wetlands, then it very well could be an option from a wetlands perspective. There's other considerations that would need to be looked at, but we did the analysis, which is included in this memo, a plan that shows in the absolute strictest case, we could not impact anything less than 8,300 square feet, right? 8,000 square feet. And I think our memo agrees with the town memo. It's infeasible.
So his point was that Treehouse did it, so why can't you? Not that you're, he's just saying maybe you're not doing your due diligence.
I don't know what
So,
Treehouse
I guess the
did.
standard is that under a limited project, you're allowed to cross wetlands to get to the buildable portion of a lot. That's the only way you can get to it. Here, we have the Old Worcester Road option, so the Conservation Commission does not have to allow the wetland crossing if there's a viable alternative. So it's a discretionary permit by the Conservation Commission, which both consultants agree that's probably unlikely because of this other alternative that's available.
Question, has Conservation Commission been approached regarding this?
Did Todd give comment on that, Bill, I believe,
Yeah.
via email?
Well, yes, Todd did comment unofficially.
Yes.
Correct.
He said he agreed with the letter from Ecotech,
Bill, to me, it would be up to his board.
but it would be up to his board to
To
make that
decide.
determination.
So would building a bridge be not disturbing the wetlands? I mean, could you build a raised approach to the, is there a reason that that's not being explored?
Bridge, 1,000-foot bridge? Yeah, 1,000-foot bridges are being explored.
The plan is, does have some reasonable detail in here, because there, you know, this is what both consultants looked at as a way to, hopscotch, I think was the word, from upland to upland to upland. That is bridges, culverts, it's using them as efficiently as possible, but we could not get under 8,000 square feet of impact.
Any other questions?
Okay. Make a motion to continue.
Do we want to make a motion to continue to January 2nd?
I'd like to make a motion, we continue to January 2nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else tonight?
Do we have anything that we want to talk about?
Just want to make sure that everybody's all set with,
How much?
Interview, me and Dawn will be here.
Yeah, Christmas is canceled.
Christmas is canceled?
Christmas is canceled for all consultants.
People, if you could please go outside, we've not quite finished with our meeting yet, can talk in the hallway.
I couldn't even help but laugh at the bridge. A big Golden Gate.
Can we charge tolls?
Yeah, I'm gonna put a toll under it.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we have enough people for the interview tomorrow.
Dawn and I,
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay.
You and I at 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock, right?
And
The planning board.
my big concern is, what is his duties now? What does he
Sure.
actually do? What's his typical day? And if he is certified?
You don't want Jessica there, as I recall, correct?
No.
I thought so.
Not
Thanks.
necessary.
Can I, and the other thing was, next Tuesday for the, Board of Selectmen's meeting for
John?
John.
All right.
Yep, and I said I can be here, so.
Okay.
I'll
you
try and
can be
get there. If I
and
can't, I'll let you guys know.
I'll make sure,
Can, oh,
What do we
Jamie
need?
left.
We need a quorum.
We need a
Yeah.
We
quorum,
need,
we just need 3 of
we
us.
need 3.
yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you,
Merry
Mark.
Christmas to you.
We should, have Janie, I'll talk to Janie to email Alicia, see if she can't make
She'll
it.
probably be back in a second.
Yeah, okay.
She went to get the budget, I think she wanted to review that.
Okay.
with you.
Oh, okay.
So,
And that's really all that I had.
so that'll be good, so.
So my
um,
understanding is this is a pre-interview, it's not those questions that were
Yeah.
sent out earlier, this is more of
Yeah, well, I
a,
guess we
Well,
can
those are the
use,
questions we used.
we can.
for
I
the
mean, those
full
are the-
interview
For the
purpose,
pre-interview.
for the pre-interview.
Yes.
Those
That
were the
was-
same questions that we used for the full interview.
Yeah, we,
The-
those,
the
no,
pre-
the
no, those are-
pre-interview were much different, remember what we did with the pre-interview? It was like,
Sure.
what
It- it
if
should
somebody
be-
approached you, it was real life, but I.
Yeah, it should be just more sense getting what his abilities are and what his duties were and
Yeah.
and how they work.
What is he
and-
doing now, and can he do this, kind of,
Much more informal.
the whole process, this whole, meeting that we're having, this whole interview, it's not even an interview, it's just to make sure that he is able to do the job, and if he's able to do the job, then we'll bring him to the whole board.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Makes sense.
You know, I'd like to know, a lot of people think that they're planners, but they're not like a planner like
You know, can you
we
read a
need in
plan, you know,
Charlton.
can you read a site plan, and,
And the other thing is, he's gonna have to be, and I'm sure he is familiar with mass state law.
He should be because of where he is right now.
That's what I was
Prior to
thinking,
that,
too.
I think
He's
most
been
of his
there.
experience was out of state, but
Yeah.
he's been where he is now for several years.
That's
right,
what I
and
was
it's like,
Over
what
10
is his
years.
actual position, is there somebody above him? We just,
Above him,
that's-
he-
right, what kind of responsibility, and,
Or on the other hand, does he work for a large department where he just delegates things to everybody else?
Yeah, We'll find that out.
Okay,
We'll grill him.
John, good. Oh my gosh.
So I think this is pretty consistent with the budgets that we've had. The only question I had was, sort of the planning studies.
yeah.
$1,000, sort of consistent with what we've got in the past, I think.
I think we've done more if we have specific studies. I wanna make sure we have, we need to update our zoning,
Right.
so
So
it's,
next year, we're gonna need an article, I think, or at least go through through the FinCom
yeah, I mean,
with the financial dollar
the
amount.
FinCom has always been pretty, you know, if we have a good justification, I think they've been pretty fair to us, but we all agree that our zoning bylaw needs,
Updating,
we
reviews.
need to bring in a consulting firm to
Right,
update this, and then, and obviously, we've seen the problems that not having the clarity and not having everything agree, businesses not fit into our descriptions. We need somebody who knows what they're doing to go through that. And I think it's better to do that sooner than later. Do you guys agree with
Yes.
this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we, I don't know how we know, I mean, Bill, would you be able to estimate what,
I would
what
say
that
we
would?
need 30 to hire.
Probably a consultant to
Excuse
help
me.
with that.
So if you wanted to put in for, say, 35, just
Is
as a
there any
placeholder.
grants available or anything that we can try to,
Yeah, we were working, weren't we working, what were we getting from,
Well, we're gonna submit
Something
a
through
request
Harvard.
to CMRPC for the zoning diagnostic.
okay, okay.
but that zoning diagnostic may be able to help with making those changes. Maybe
Right.
it'll be
Show where
less
the-
work for a consultant, maybe,
Could be.
or maybe it's stuff.
Show where the deficiencies are and.
Or
what
maybe
needs to
it's
be
stuff
addressed.
that we can use the diagnostic to, and then bring in a professional, instead of $30,000, it can cost 10,000. You know,
Yep.
maybe we can really cut that down by,
Sure, but I still think we need to do something in the next town meeting to get that in the budget for
I
that.
agree,
and
so
at least
so we
come up
gotta
with-
kind of maybe have more of a discussion on what we,
Well, this is for 2020,
It's for July 1,
July
Yeah.
1, which
Right.
is fiscal year ending
will be
2020.
2020, right?
Okay.
So, I don't know, is it appropriate to put it into the department budget or to make a separate request?
I think we make a finance committee, right?
Yeah, I do a separate request.
And then
Okay.
see, and then,
Okay.
and I guess if they say no, we can always go to,
And see if there's any grants
open the-
available, I think would be probably the best action first, and
Well,
see
that-
what we can
well,
get
that-
for grants, and then we know
well,
what
that
we need to.
diagnostic would have been a first step process in
Sure.
any
Right.
zoning anyway, so
Yep, for any
if you're
grants.
saying 30, maybe it's half, maybe it's less
Sure.
because we already have that. Maybe the
But
town
there's an
can.
awful lot of work and, you know,
Oh,
Yeah,
right,
but-
right,
Oh, yeah.
work in revising the zoning bylaw with meetings and
Mhm.
interviews and
Is that VHB?
drafting. Huh?
Who did it last time? Was it VHB?
They did the master plan.
They did the
I don't
master
know
plan.
if
They did a
they've
good
been
job.
involved in zoning bylaw work,
Okay.
but they've got people that can.
I mean, we have
Okay.
that, and we're coming on 11 year for the master plan too, so next year, I think the zoning bylaw is a priority, and then after that,
Master
I
plan.
think
With the new
master
master
plan
plan.
should be relooked at, because it's a decade, more than a decade.
So zoning bylaw and possibly rezoning some of the land in town to be more in line with what it is.
Right.
Moving it out of
The
agriculture.
bylaw and
moving
looking at the
into-
overall setup, I mean, the agricultural clearly should be residential.
Yep, in some
There's
cases.
a lot of
I'm
movement,
That's all,
so.
the mapping changes usually come out of the master plan.
Okay.
So,
A lot of work.
yes, it's been a long time since the zoning, I mean, we've been spot changing, kind of like changing a little pieces as we
Right.
go, but it makes sense in overhaul to make sure all the pages, everything agrees.
And that everything agrees with everything else in it.
So make a motion, we accept this budget as written? Is that what we need to do?
Can we request to increase our stipends too?
We haven't had a meeting yet. So,
Yeah, I will,
Just see what we get.
okay.
We work pretty darn hard.
Second.
And I like to take my kids to more than McDonald's on the stipend.
What would you like it as to?
I don't know, we'll just use a random number. It's 200, do you want to go to 300? It's 200 a year, right?
Yeah.
Want to go to 300 a year?
Yeah, why
see what
not?
happens with that.
Throw it out there.
Okay.
And upgrade to friendlies now.
Yeah.
So we have two other upcoming
So do
agenda
we
items.
need to vote on this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I seconded it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. December 18th, there was a joint appointment with the selectmen.
Yes.
For John Smith to be the alternate member of the board, so hopefully a couple folks can go to that. On January 8th, there's an all boards departments meeting you are invited to, and we are posting. Assuming
Oh,
that
okay,
we'll have a,
okay.
a
Just to be on the
quorum.
safe side.
Let's all go.
Right. Here's another,
And bring your tape recorders.
some of the agenda items for that.
I'll leave that there for you.
And then we have the decision of the zoning board of appeals on the rain for rent.
Oh, they gave us,
So the ZBA upheld the building commissioner's interpretation that it was a permitted use in the community business district. 3-2 to voted to overturn, but they needed 4.
They need a
votes,
supermajority.
so
supermajority.
It fell for lack of a supermajority.
Kind of sad over this.
So.
It is what it is.
So that's exactly the kind of thing we want to look at in terms of the use table, what uses are permitted in that district, to remove this kind of uncertainty that, creates
Sometimes
so
you
much
just
friction.
can't predict what somebody's gonna bring in there,
Right.
though, you know.
Right.
It just
like,
wasn't, it wasn't what was in the heart of the master plan,
Sure,
and
it
it
was
seems
missing
like the
from that, yeah.
zoning should have protected what was in the master plan. And, but it is, I guess we
Definitely need to
learned
do a
our
better job
lesson
of-
to make sure that we clean it up a
made
little bit.
possible.
Is that,
According to this, they can appeal this again
It'd have
They
to be
can
the
appeal
court.
to Superior Court.
to Superior Court.
Yeah. I don't think
20
they
days
will.
from the date that's filed.
if whoever appeals this wants, a planning board letter of support, can we do that?
I think we can.
Do we have to vote on that? So,
No, I think we'll wait and see what happens.
okay,
Yeah.
You can
so
weigh in
we'll
as
wait.
a-
But if,
probably
if,
a friend of the,
right, if somebody wants to, if somebody is doing this, then contact us and we will look, we would like to support any appeal that's gonna happen.
did you ever submit anything to the ZBA, or just
I-
attend in person?
We attended, but I also wrote a letter from, as the
Okay.
chair, saying
Okay,
that
so that's in the record already.
details,
Yeah,
so.
and I
whatever.
wrote a letter as an individual.
Okay,
And I wrote a letter as an individual also.
And we did get approved for that LNG as a
yes, petition to intervene.
interview.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So will that include us attending meetings in Boston, is that?
Yes,
part of the intervening, we can.
Not just
we
attending,
can-
we can actually
Sure,
We can
call
actually
witnesses,
speak at
ask
it.
petitions,
questions
yeah.
and,
you have the right to speak
yeah.
and be heard.
We have the
So
right
I
to
guess
speak.
we kind of need to know when those meetings are happening and.
to make sure that, I think we should try our best to have one of us. I mean, I'm lucky that I work in Boston
Oh,
and
perfect.
I can drop, in
Drop
Malden,
by.
but, I can drop in.
Sure.
Um,
Are you sure
So-
you actually work? You seem to
I like just don't sleep at night. Just don't sleep at night.
Some people don't require a lot of sleep.
So I'm so cheery all the time. But all of us should be able to have a lot of insight in this. Surprisingly, multiple people, some abutters and stuff, submitted their applications, and Millennium Power Plan can question us and the Southbridge Selectmen.
Town council.
Town council.
Southbridge Town Council.
Town council, yeah. Some of the other ones were questioned and requested more information from, so
Yeah,
they're just
and then
residents.
the rest were, and
Those letters were from the applicant, sort of suggesting that they be denied.
To the board.
status.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so we don't have the actual decisions on that yet.
Okay, so that's just a
and
recommendation from the.
I
from the
thought,
resident.
I thought it was interesting that there isn't more than just the planning board. And like, I was surprised that the selectmen didn't, apply, and, maybe even like the building commission, like just because of all the knowledge that everybody has, to get more people at the table, I was,
Yeah.
but,
It's a good question.
One of those things.
so we wanna reach out.
We're justifying our increase in stipend.
That's right, that's why I use that, because now we have to deal with the LNG thing alone.
You paid
So-
mileage too, right?
Yeah.
I would, just, like, sometimes I don't say, I should not say what comes to my mind. We reach out to the selectmen and make sure that if they have questions that they would like
Oh.
us to ask too,
Yeah.
make sure that we represent them, because we want to represent the town well.
Should
mean, I
we wait
guess-
for that decision first, and once we get that decision?
Well, the
we
decision
can
looks like
push on?
Yeah, I think it's
it's,
you know, it's a
that's,
no-brainer.
that seems,
So maybe
that's,
we want to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen, letting them know that we
or
will
even,
be acting
maybe
as-
all the board, like, can we do like an all-board memo? You can just shoot
Yeah,
out
certainly
the,
at the all-board meeting.
and
would be
make sure
appropriate,
that
yeah.
if anybody has questions, and if one of us will make sure that all of their questions are answered, if that makes sense. So at least everybody's knowledge and insight from, the leadership positions in the town can be addressed, because. Anything else?
We still have another hour.
No.
Oh, Jean, you send a letter to Mary about the marijuana?
I forgot. I will do that as soon as I go home. I said that before, but I will do
Would
it.
you let the board know what that is?
Oh, I'd been asked to sit on the marijuana advisory committee
Nice.
as
I know they
a
were
member
looking for
of
a
the,
planning board.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
they approached me and I told them I would, if that's okay with
That's
everybody.
excellent.
Yeah,
That's
that's great.
fabulous.
Nice.
Good to know.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.